Nightshades first. Ray. Hi. Lady Eva. Good to see you. Crimson. And I haven't seen you before. You new? Can you all hear me? My mic working? 2. Awesome. Awesome. Good to know. Good to know. Hi, nice to see you. Good to be here. Quantum. Awesome. Good. Good to know you can hear me. I didn't check this mic before I plugged it in. How am I? You're Iranian, and how am I? You have your Dobby cosplay on right now. That's awesome. I am here. So I'm alive. I've had a bit of a rough weekend. I had to fix my car again because we didn't have the right hose, but I got it fixed and I should be able to go places and work. And work. Mostly work, but I actually got to shoot content today, so that was nice. I haven't really gotten a lot of content done in the past couple months. I was really struggling to get anything out, and now I feel like I got a decent chunk of stuff done today, so that was nice. Hello, good to see you. I was kind of late getting the eulogy walkthrough up, so sorry about that. Feel free to take your time with those. But do I want eulogies? Absolutely, yes I do. Do I want cat videos? Oh, all the time. So yeah, thank you everybody who keeps sending me cat videos routinely. I do get those and I still watch those. Sometimes I watch them in big chunks at a time. So if you get a bunch of liked messages from me, that's why. It's because I just sat down and watched all of them. T Galaxies is here for the finale. Good to see you. Princess Tegan. Awesome, letting people roll in. Swiftblood's here. That's always nice. I was just watching, I just sat down and watched, a bunch that Insomniac had sent me that I had... Yes, you do. I let them build up until I get a lot of anxiety, and then I'll sit there and I'll watch, 26 of them in a row. So... No, I haven't checked the redacted yet today, so I'll have to do that later. But a lot of the time, several times in the week, I will go through the redacted and just watch all of the cat videos that people link me. So it's so nice. Am I concerned that you're here? I'd be more concerned if you weren't here, because then I'd feel like you're up to no good somewhere else. No, I'm joking. Best time to watch 30 or so cat. Yeah, because I'll get a whole lot of anxiety, and then I'll just sit down and watch a bunch of them at once, and then I feel better. And that's how I handle anxiety. Especially when, you can't get a hose in your car and you've been trying to get this part for a week, and every single time you get the piece to install it, something else goes wrong, and then coolant sprays all over your car. So you sit and watch cat videos. Maybe don't fight. It's 5 minutes in. Yes. Crimson, that's exactly how I handle it almost every single time. Yeah, I've had 2 breaks today shooting content where I just watch a bunch of cat videos. Um, oh, awesome. Thanks, maybe. Is it more cat videos? Because I'll take them. I'll take those off your hands. Don't worry about it. That and yeah, I did. I did get that burger. It was nice. Uh, I was in the redacted, just hanging out because my car broke down last week while I was at work on Thursday, and I was just stranded in the middle of the nowhere, side of the road, and the nozzle that held the hose to the coolant tank had broken off again, but different hose this time. It was the smaller one that goes from the reservoir to the top of the coolant regulator, and the nozzle broke off. So I was just sitting there for several hours because I was too far away to sort of coast my car home, with me being so low on coolant, and it was already like 106 that day. So I was like, there's no way I can get this car home. I was well out of the city. I was in like the middle of a rural road, no property, just a cliff of wilderness underneath me. And I was chilling there for like 5 hours. So I hopped in the VC and the redacted and was just straight chilling, middle of the afternoon, which never happens. And so I was like, man, I'm so hot. I want a burger. And Swift blood. I did get that burger and it was delicious. Yeah, I was. I had to, I was like, I really hope I don't have to, like, can I say, I don't think I can say that on live. I didn't want to have to use the restroom in the middle of nowhere, but I had drank a bunch of water because it was 106. So I was like, I'm on a public road. If can't do that. I can't do that. So I was like, I'm gonna have to climb into this abyss if I need to go number one. Like I was like, I don't want to do that, and I did have to do that twice. Like 3 times, 2 or 3 times, climb down this cliff so that no one could, far enough down so no one could see me and I could still stand without falling. It was not great. I got bit like 10 times by mosquitoes, all right around the ankle area, coincidentally. So now I have a bunch of mosquito bites. It was not a fun time. And my car's been like, it's been me trying to get, I was trying to get the nozzle that goes in the thermostat housing on the top of the coolant regulator. This is probably very boring to anyone else, but I was trying to get the nozzle on the top of the thermostat housing for the coolant regulator, and no one had the nozzle. They only had the piece that came with the apparatus that we had to get last time when the other hose split. So we were like, why is this nozzle not on here? It doesn't fit the hose, and that seems sus. So we were trying to find the nozzle. We couldn't, so we started like looking it up, and apparently this was an aftermarket thing that they had changed. And so we were like, okay, then the width of the coolant tank is wrong. The width of the nozzle on the coolant tank is obviously wrong, and we need to change that to match the width of the hose that matches the thermostat housing. They didn't resize the coolant tank nozzle. So we were like, how did they make it to where you have 2 separate diameter hoses that connect the reservoir to the coolant tank to the coolant regulator? That doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. The hole is this big, and the nozzle is this big, and you have a big gap around the, it doesn't make sense. So we figured it out. They made a separate hose that has a special applicator on the side of it, but we didn't figure that out for like several days. So we finally got it fixed, and I can work next week. I've pretty much just running around my house cleaning it for the past several days. It's been really lame. So, now that you know my boring car story, how are you? Hi, Bloody Nightmare. I believe you're new. For everybody who's new here, you're going to be real surprised in a few minutes. Good. I saw in the redacted that you weren't feeling well, and I was a little bit worried. I didn't really get a whole lot of chance to respond this weekend with everything going on. Yes, I have. There's a couple things. I haven't put them out yet, actually, but I have some things sitting in my drafts that are other than my hero. I also do what we're going to be doing today. I read a book every Tuesday at 8, and if you don't know what it is, you're going to be real confused in a few minutes because we're going to start reading it. But it's called Johannes Cabal, and we're on the 3rd of the 5th in the series. If you don't know what's going on, you can check out the link to my YouTube in the bio, and it has all the recordings of the previous series. And I do Johannes from that, and I'm currently making content for that specifically. So I'm enjoying it. Oh, that does sound nice. Everybody being gone for 2 weeks. Sweet. Are you by yourself completely? Because that would be lit. Just you and Lucy chilling? I go back to work. Yeah, for sure. I've had COVID twice and it hasn't been fun at all. So I hope you get to go back to work and everything goes smoothly and there's no... Because I know after I got over COVID, I still felt really weak. Even after I felt better, I felt weak and my sense of smell was still messed up. So hopefully nothing like that happens. Smoothies are... Why not both? Oh. Well, mostly alone. It's more alone than you were before. You have more control of the situation. So that'll be nice. Yeah, I'm gonna crochet in VC later. Also, thank you. I am I'm trans, and I don't talk about it a lot, but I'm on testosterone, so thank you. I've been working at it. My bottom line. Oh God, where are you going now? I feel like you just got back. Oh, whoa. No, wait. So sorry for what? Did I make someone feel bad for something? I'm not trying to. I try to be as nice as possible. I'm generally pretty mean, but I'm not trying to be. Jen keeps abandoning us. Jen, how dare you? We had a nice family going on, and you just keep leaving. No. You weren't in VC last night. I considered hopping in, and then saw you weren't there, and I was working on something. I was like, well, I'm going to see who's there, depending on when I get done with this thing. I was trying to restyle my Johannes wig. And after I was done, I hopped back on, and no one was on there. So I was... Yeah, it's so weird when Jen's quiet. Oh no, I don't normally talk about like me being trans a whole lot on this platform. I didn't make a platform for it, and I just don't generally talk about it like a whole lot on my channel. But no, I didn't take offense to that. That's not what I meant. Yeah, Jen, how dare you leave us? We have a thing you went away now. Ooh, we got a female Dobby in the house. That's cool. Anybody who's in cosplay right now, sound off. I'll start. No, I won't. I don't start anything. Hi. That seemed like it was a very disingenuous hi. I didn't mean for it to. is the username. Katsuki Bakugo. Where are you guys going? I did. I started book club. I did start that. I can't say I didn't start anything when I did do this. It was unintentional, and it technically wasn't my idea, because the first time I considered it, I was like, nobody's going to sit here and listen to me read a book. That seems stupid. If you don't know what's going on here, that's what we do. We read a book every week. This is book club. Thank you for joining us. If you haven't read anything before now, you're going to be very confused. But if you read the title of this live, you know it's the finale of Johannes Cabal, the third installment, the Fear Institute. We have the final chapter today, and we're also going to go through Death of Me, which is a Johannes Cabal short story. If you're here and you don't know who Johannes Cabal is, he's a necromancer. We're reading a book about him. He's really determined to be able to make a full reincarnation, including the soul, from any revenant he revives. So, there's 5 books, and we're on the 3rd one. This is the end, and if you're just now joining us, I'm very sorry. I'm not recapping the entire series, but I will tell you what happened last time. Nyarlathotep showed Johannes a vision of him being completely successful, sort of a monkey's paw situation, in reviving his dead wife, but instead, when she rose, she became disillusioned when faced with what Johannes had mentally and emotionally become. And after Johannes wakes up, he's extremely pissed because Nyarlathotep had showed him this alternate reality against his will. And after he leaves, he tries to make his way down into the abyss, same as me, except in terms of just urinating and going back up, he landed in a bunch of hair because his rope broke, and he was surrounded by ghouls who were all vaguely threatening but not really doing anything, and it struck him as unintentionally hilarious, and he laughed himself into insanity and has now become a ghoul. So wherever you thought this story was going to go, only Ray was right. Only Ray. Anyway, so I'm sure we're all very excited. Yes, every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Central, if you want to join us. If you want to know what happened before this, you can feel free to go click the link in my TikTok bio. You'll find my YouTube, and that will take you to every recording of every chapter that we have read so far. So, Simford Dinks is here. Heyo! Before you even ask, we've all eaten, we've all stayed hydrated, at least we were supposed to, because there was a reminder in Redacted. I checked earlier. So everybody should have. Whether they did, I know I did, but yes, nourishment. And I got some water over here. I also have coffee, but that's unrelated. Insomniac. You normally do, and I'm really thankful for that. Lady Aoife's got everybody's best interest at heart. Yeah. Alright, so we're gonna read a book. Who's ready? Do you all have your smoothies, pets, water, dinner? Y'all ready to rock and roll, or do we need to wait for a second? I'll hold up for you guys. What's the coffee of the day? Oh, it's Lady Aoife's. I made a combination of Lady Aoife's and Bushwhacker, and I made it iced because it's 100 degrees up here. So, really excited about it. I've been trying out all sorts of different combinations because I have So much coffee, thanks to you all for keeping me caffeinated. Keep Shinzo Caffeinated 2022 is going very smoothly, thanks to you guys. Thank you for supporting me and my caffeine addiction. You know I appreciate you. You know I love you. Thank you for doing so. 2, we're ready to go? All right. We're gonna start. This is the final chapter of the 3rd book. So, and for whoever needs to know, it's chapter 17, page 308 is what I got. I don't know what your copy says. Chapter 17, in which Cabal experiences omophagia, annoys the Vatican, and endures much. The physical transformation was rapid, the mental one slow. More than once, Johannes Cabal wished that the reverse had been true. He sat in the darkness, chewing on the haunch of a newspaper proprietor who had just been buried a day or 2 before. The meat was rich with avarice and mendacity, rendered salty by the crocodile tears of his heirs. Cabal had balked at eating human flesh at first, despite the rising appetite for it within him. The leader of the ghouls had come to him then and pointed out that the obvious truth, that most people were little more than dumb animals, and that in any case this could be regarded as a form of recycling, and therefore was terribly sensible, as well as delicious. Cabal had still been reluctant, but then they had brought him the best joint of Archbishop, and after that he had no problems at all. If the dietary changes were eventually acceptable, the physical ones were less so, and the inevitable mental degradation concerned him most of all. The ghouls were not stupid. They were about as intelligent as an average human, but their intelligence rarely wavered much higher or lower than that, and the thought of being reduced to merely average human intelligence appalled Cabal. Indeed, if he were to be honest with himself, it terrified him. Less dismaying than the cannibalism, though as he rationalized it, he was no longer truly human, and therefore no cannibal, but almost as troubling as the imminent collapse of his mental faculties was the nudity. Ghouls had little use for clothes, a mode that Cabal was sure he would not adopt. As time passed, and in the eternal darkness beneath the worlds, he had no idea how much time that meant. His garments grew constrictive, and he felt intolerably swaddled and contained within them. He shed them in an isolated tunnel, and left them there, neatly folded in the last memorial to Johannes Cabal. It should hardly have surprised him, this change. It was not even unknown in the history of his profession. The basic precepts of necromancy involved hanging around graveyards, tinkering with corpses, and inevitably having dealings, friendly or otherwise, with ghouls. Given that the triggering events for a ghoulish transformation are psychic rather than material, and include an interest in human cadavers, in empathy, if not necessarily a sympathy with ghouls, and the ingestion of human remains, Cabal could only conclude that he should have washed his hands more thoroughly between dissections and lunch. Somewhere along the way, he must have inadvertently enjoyed a morsel of meat that had not come from the butcher. It served him right for eating in his laboratory. Still, it could have been worse. He'd only changed species instead of, say, picking up hepatitis. Hi, Nody. Aw. So he sat with the others in a lightless cavern, chewing a media tycoon's thigh and wondering what would become of him. He had failed. It had always been a possibility, but he had imagined the path would be abruptly halted by his death. It had never occurred to him that he might be turned aside from it, watching helplessly as potential success paled into certain failure. He looked at the others scattered around, industriously rationing out parcels of stolen meat amongst themselves. He didn't even need visible light to see them. Everything was limed in a strange and beautiful incandescence that showed details in the most mundane things that he had never dreamed might be there. This was a gift of his new physiology, and it was true, this he did not mind so much. "But," meeped a voice, "you are not happy." Cabal turned to see the leader squatting nearby, watching him with calm interest. "No," he replied, "I am not happy. I did not complete my work, and soon I will not even be able to remember why it was important to me." "You will," laughed the elder, a sound like a choking terrier. "You will remember. But I won't want to. You are so sorry for yourself. All your power and knowledge and books, and you are sorry for yourself. We have heard so much about Johannes, Cabal, a clever man, but sorry for yourself." Unused to being chastised, least of all by a creature that used crypts and tombs as all-you-can-eat buffets, Cabal snapped. "The process is irreversible. Everybody knows that." "Oh, yes," said the leader, nodding understandingly. "Everybody." Yes, everybody. Well, except for Culpin's, but his theory of countermorphic residual transfiguration pertained only to lycanthropes where the process is essentially reversible in any event, not this sort of transformation where once the new morphic form is achieved, it is retained. "Achieved," said the leader, nodding. It looked off into the cavern, apparently already bored with the conversation. "Retained." "Exactly so," said Cabal. It was nice to use his intellect. It was like looking over the old mansion he had grown up in before being permanently evicted and spending the rest of his life in a small studio flat. Once the full morphotypical state has been... He paused. "The destination is final. But the journey..." He leaped to his feet and wobbled slightly. His knees were midway through the transformation of bending backwards to bending forwards and currently bent both ways, which was good for yoga and bad for almost everything else. "But the journey may be aborted. Quickly, tell me, how much longer before I am entirely a ghoul? Days? Weeks? Months?" The leader looked sideways at him. "You do not like being a ghoul?" No, I don't. No insult intended, but I have plans, and eating people for eternity isn't among them." The leader looked at him fully. Then it grinned in mad dog grin that ghouls do so well, exposing every fang it had. "That is fine. We are not insulted. You are Johannes, Cabal." It gestured at the others. "We have enough numbers. There are lots of ghouls, but only one Johannes, Cabal. You have at least 6 weeks, Johannes, Cabal. At most, 8. Cabal's initial enthusiasm abated a little in the face of what he needed to do and the time in which he had to do it. "Stabilizer elixir won't be easy to synthesize. I'll need a laboratory, chemical reagents, books." The leader made a dismissive gesture with a paw. "We steal bodies. My people. We have stolen 3 dead popes. The Vatican was very cross. Glass things, chemicals, books. They would be no trouble. Much easier
than dead popes.
Why on earth did you steal 3 dead popes? Asked Cabal.
First, to make the Vatican very cross. That was funny. Second reason, delicious.
Considering the ghouls' bad reputation, Cabal had found them astonishingly affable creatures. When the leader gathered them together to tell them that Cabal was going to attempt to stop his own transformation, they were not insulted, and when it called upon them to help in any way possible, they were happy to do so. If his life had been a little different, Cabal concluded, being a ghoul really wasn't so bad. While they were intellectually stunted, at least by his standards, their aesthetic senses went unblunted. He had discovered one ghoul painting a study of a London tube station, in which ghouls watched the inattentive commuters on the platform from the shadows of the tunnel. The execution was exquisite, even if the subject matter was not. As a race, they were mutually supportive and sanguine in their outlook. Previously, Cabal had always reckoned them to be rivals in his graveyard harvest, nuisances at best, dangers at worst. Now, however, he saw them for what they were, stoic opportunists, and he respected them for it. Should his efforts over the next few weeks prove successful, he would be far more tolerant of their activities and never shoot one again, unless really irked. First, it was necessary to possess a copy of the thesis published to universal dismay by Arist Kolpins, renowned lycanthropologist, son of a Russian emigre and Kentish haberdasher, and now a permanent patient of Bridechester Asylum. This the ghouls stole in an excess of mischief from the Vatican's very own Index Laborum Prohibitum. Apparently, the theft made the Vatican cross. Cabal didn't care if it made it livid, just as long as he had a copy. Flicking as quickly as his increasingly long and distressingly rubbery fingers could manage it, Cabal disregarded the other artifacts of Kolpin's peculiar genius, consisting of crude pictures of women bathing amid unnecessarily Byzantine plumbing, and concentrated on the fragmentary references to the metamorphic process. Kolpin's terminology was imprecise and as mutable as his subject, but over the period of 15 precious days, Cabal succeeded at shaking out the seed of an idea. On the 16th day, Cabal drew up a shopping list, and the ghouls were dispatched to gather the items therein requested. They went joyfully, apparently enjoying some petty larceny in their lives to make a change from the drudgery of workaday grave robbing. There was a rash of thefts, not only across the earth, but across its history, and across the histories of other earths and counter-earths. An earth that never should have been, an earth that never shall be. And as the ghouls happily voyaged through strange dimensions to play in Cabal's scavenger hunt, they came back eventually with many of the things he had requested, some things similar to those requested, and quite a lot of things they had taken a shine to in passing. Another dead pope, said Cabal to one such returnee. He peered into the sack again and sighed. Though this one shows signs that he wasn't dead before he was folded up and put in here. I imagine the Vatican was quite cross about this, was it? To which the ghoul nodded happily. As Cabal worked at putting together a laboratory down in the ghoulish caverns, he would sometimes turn to find the ghoul leader there, hunkered down in the shadows, watching his progress in silence. Cabal had noted that the leader was also changing in strange ways, his speech becoming simpler and more like that of the others in the pack. This, he gathered, was because he had once been a man of great intellect himself, but that the steady erosion of his humanity had reached even this last bastion as inexorably as an incoming tide. The ghoul didn't seem to be so very concerned about it, so Cabal never broached the subject. "It's coming along," Cabal told him. "I should be able to start experimentation soon." He paused, and unpacking a condenser tube from its box, stolen from the chemistry lab of a small boys' public school in Hampshire, and turned to the leader. I am appreciative of all of your help in this enterprise, sir, but I must know, why exactly are you doing so? The ghoul lifted its long index finger, a finger graced with too many joints to be seemly, and counted.
One thing, Johannes Cabal is necromancer. Necromancers get respect from grave folk, from ghouls. Johannes Cabal needs help. Johannes Cabal gets help. Two things. If Johannes Cabal is unhappy as grave folk, he should not be grave folk. Three things. Stealing is fun.
Cabal nodded, satisfied. He had certainly heard less worthwhile reasons given to commit the most appalling crimes in the past. A willingness to help and a raison d'etre for a bit of racial kleptomania were better than most. The apparatus was constructed rapidly, though some of the more unconventional reagents intended for its retorts took longer to procure. One in particular required special care, and Cabal led a party of ghouls to help him acquire it. He returned somber and quiet, bearing the skeletal tip of a left-hand little finger. That grave remains sacrosanct, he told the leader. Spread the word among the grave folk. If any break into it, man or ghoul, they will regret it. He held up the small bone and regarded it with melancholy. Apart from me, obviously. The leader did not need to inquire why, for it had already been informed that the gravestone above the coffin they had so respectfully robbed bore the words, Gottfried Cabal, survived by his wife, Lise, and son, Johannes, gone to join his elder son, Horst, in God's grace. Requiescat in paz. Instead, it watched Cabal painstakingly clean the bone and then carefully powder exactly as much as he needed before placing the remainder in a fresh test tube, sealing it, and stowing it in his Gladstone bag. Cabal's motivation was high. Every day he found it a little harder to remember things or to carry out mental calculations. He was heading towards average human intelligence, and he found the experience stifling and claustrophobic. On the one hand, it appalled him that people were content to live with such small intellects, although on the other, it went a long way to explaining so many things about society that otherwise defied belief. At least the ghoul seemed as highly motivated as he. He had only to suggest that an item might be useful for a gang to run off and return anywhere from hours to a couple of days later with it in paw. That at least was one less thing to worry about. But the narrow window of opportunity the elixir presented and the possibility of securing further supplies of some of the reagents needed meant that he had little latitude for supporting experimentation. The few tests he was able to conduct were highly encouraging. It seemed that Colpin's obsessions with werewolves, plumbing, and naked ladies had actually borne fruit. But there could only be a single acid test, and as much as he wanted to hold it off until he could be sure he was doing the right thing, its time was growing inexorably closer. At last, Johannes Cabal ran out of excuses for himself. Time was short. The principles of his work were already beginning to escape him, and he knew he must act now or forever be trapped in the Stygian places beneath the earth and its close neighbors in dream and out of it. He carried out the last reactions, filtered away an unnecessary precipitate, added another reagent dropwise until the contents of his test tube went from sepia to colorless and clear. He added the powdered bone, marking the elixir with a trace of his own former humanity. and shook it vigorously for 10 minutes until the bone had entirely dissolved. Then he neutralized the remaining solution and distilled it. He was left with perhaps a fluid ounce of clear, slightly oily liquid, which he gathered in a small test tube. He allowed it to cool and then stoppered it. It was so small, little more than an ampule, yet everything rested upon it. He gathered his faculties, arose from his laboratory stool, obligingly stolen from a Brazilian university by the ghouls, and went out into the main cavern. He stood before them, straining to stand upright as a man stood, instead of the slight crouch that the ghoul form encouraged, and held up the elixir. "Friends," he meeped, and it was true that he had rarely felt so friendly towards anybody or anything. "Friends, I come before you today to thank you for your aid in my work." The ghouls were already scampering over on all fours to be close and catch his every word. "This transformation clearly suits many of you, and is, I think, a more honorable and honest career than, say, the judiciary. It is not, however, a career suited to everyone." Cabal could see the ghoul leader standing nearby, nodding slightly in silent appreciation of these sentiments. "I have found my stay with you highly educational, and a wide expansion of my horizons, and as I have come to know the grave folk, I have also come to understand you, and to respect and appreciate you. When I return to the world above, I will never forget you. Indeed, I believe that we may combine our forces in many mutually advantageous ways." Cabal had learned to see expression and emotion in the muzzled gray rubbery faces, and he could see sadness there now. They were sad to see him go, he knew, and probably sad that all the justified thieving had to stop. Despite himself, he felt quite fond of them.
"Now?"
asked the one to his right. "Well, let me get home first, and then," began Cabal, but the ghoul was not speaking to him.
"Now,"
said the leader, quietly but firmly. Suddenly Cabal was being held down, his arms and legs pinioned. "What?" he shouted. "What are you doing?" He thrashed in their grip, but there were too many of them, and they were far too strong. Then he felt his paw being gently but inexorably forced open. He could only swear and damn them as the elixir was taken from him. "No, get off me, you verdamned animals! It is no use to you! It's too late for you!" He fought until he was exhausted and weeping with anger and fear of his certain future. The ghouls continued to keep him still as their leader stood before him. He held up the small glass tube that held all Cabal's hopes and said,
"I am sorry, Johannes Cabal. I am sorry, as you will be sorry too. But not yet."
"It's useless to you," rasped Cabal through a larynx grown unused to human speech. "You cannot use it. You are fully transformed."
"Yes, full transformation. Sorry again. I lied."
Cabal looked up suddenly at him. "You did what?"
"Body change, yes. 6, 8 weeks. Mind change, much longer."
Still looking thoughtfully at the elixir in its right paw, it batted self-referentially at itself with its left.
"Mind finally going, but not gone yet. Not too late for me."
He looked at Cabal.
"Long as you fight it, not too late for you either."
"If you take that away from me," said Cabal, looking at the test tube, "then it is too late for me."
"No,"
said the leader.
"You do not understand yet. You will understand."
It started to turn away and paused, looking back guiltily at Cabal.
"I am sorry, Johannes Cabal. Wish there was another way.
And suddenly it was off at a bound, running into one of the tunnels, and from there to anywhere and any time. "No," Cabal called weakly after it. "It won't work for you. You don't understand. It wasn't formulated for you. It isn't keyed to you. Please come back." The leader did not, and the other ghouls held Cabal prisoner until pursuit became hopeless. Then they released him and slunk away, ashamed. Cabal sat alone, unable to take in the enormity of what had just happened to him. No, that isn't quite correct. Cabal was a man who had bandied words with gods and devils and had yet to experience anything of sufficient enormity to prevent him functioning. It wasn't the scale of the disaster that distressed him so, vast though it was. It was the irrationality of it. The ghouls might be childlike sometimes, but they were no fools, their leader least of all. Cabal had made no secret of the elixir's specificity, so what did the ghoul leader hope to gain? To crush Cabal's spirit? Possibly, but everything, had seemed almost as upset about it as he did. He tried to visualize the ghoul leader stopping in some lightless tunnel to open the vial and gulp down the contents, waiting for several minutes while nothing at all happened, and then looking faintly put out. Cabal could not understand it. It made no sense at all. Until the slowing mechanisms of his mind stumbled upon an idea, and he considered it, and found it was not wanting in any respect, and realized that it was therefore likely enough to be the truth. He sat frozen by the idea as its ramifications rippled out and illuminated his ignorance like a flare down a pit. It was at first breathtaking, and his breath was duly taken. Then he started to laugh. It was an open, full-throated laugh with an air of relief so strong in it that it occasionally tended a little to hysteria, but was reined back whenever it did so. It was an honest laugh, and it was the laughter of a man, and not that of a ghoul. When finally he was able to bring it under control and it quieted into sob chuckles, he said loudly enough that anyone nearby would hear it, "Oh, I won't forget.
I won't forget what I am. I will never forget who I am."
Then he stood and bellowed into the empty darkness.
"I am Johannes Cabal, necromancer, mildly infamous in some quarters. Rise up, ghouls. Come to me. There is work to be done. Preparations to be made."
And from every corner, every tunnel, they crept and slunk and crawled and scampered to form a great mass of a corpse-eating audience before him. They were no longer filled with guilt and regret at what they had done, because they knew. He now understood. They grinned their mad dog grins, happy again. The ghoul leader bounded through darkness, the curving rocky tunnel flaming in smudged colors to its eyes. It wasn't perfect sight. Light was required for that. But it was substantially better than running into walls and off precipices. He had wondered how it worked for some time, but had known that it was beyond his ability to deduce. Still, that would be changing shortly. Just as soon as he drank the stolen elixir, he felt no guilt at its theft. Why should he? He knew that Cabal would soon understand his reasons, then come to regard his new ghoulish existence not as a malign curse, but as the great opportunity it truly was. It turned a corner, scurried across a nexus in the great deep darkness, frequented by the fearsome gugs, and darted into a new narrow tunnel that had been melted through the rock by a juvenile Chthonian 20 millennia before. The ghoul knew the giant worm-like Chthonian in question, and, at least by repute, it was now a young adult of truculent demeanor and a burden to all 7 of its parents. But the ghoul had more important matters to concentrate on than the soap opera lives of the selfish and invertebrate. It paused, sensing the eddies in time that surged those back strange places as gentle as breezes. The hackles of its neck rose, and it knew it was close, sniffing the air for a scent of a particular time and space. The creatures in those tenebrous extents wandered up and down the years like cows in a field, unaware and uncaring. But the ghouls understood instinctively the opportunities and dangers, since they were among the few who ever ventured into the worlds that abutted the dreamlands, and among the even fewer who cared. Soon, the scent of fresh air would have been apparent even to a sense of smell less perceptive than a ghoul's. The ghoul leader stopped and looked back as if half expecting pursuit, but the tunnel was empty except for himself and an explosion of roots that entered the space from above. The ghoul searched roughly within them, quickly locating a hollow from which it withdrew a brown paper parcel packaged as incompetently as only a ghoul or a schoolboy could manage. It reached further into the hollow and pulled out Cabal's Gladstone bag and cane, both stolen only hours before, while Cabal's attention had been on the latter stages of the elixir synthesis. Stolen by subordinate ghouls, hidden here at their leader's command. The ghoul fumbled with the parcel's string, quickly grew frustrated with trying to untie the knots, and tore away the paper instead, with its long, powerful fingers snapping the strings as easily as it could a neck. Within lay Cabal's sloughed skin, the carefully folded and stored bundle of clothes. The ghoul measured its arm against that of the suit jacket and grimaced at how much shorter the sleeve was than the distance from its shoulder to its wrist. Still, there was a solution to that. Holding all the stolen goods in its arms, it moved onwards in a stooped lope up the sloping path until the rock turned to clay and compacted soil. The tunnel stopped abruptly in a convex wall of cut stone, each block about the size of a loaf. With no hesitation, the ghoul drew the stopper from the little tube of elixir and gulped it down. Now, working quickly, it removed the stones and stacked them carefully on the tunnel floor until there was a gap large enough for it to maneuver its scrawny frame through and take the stolen things with it. The village was asleep, its occupants deep in sleep, though few sank deep enough to visit the lands from which the ghoul had so recently departed. There was nobody around to see the long-fingered hand, tipped with gore-stained talons, rise from the shadows of the well on the village green and grasp the edge, or to witness the gray, hideous form that rose up after it. The ghoul looked cautiously around before jumping soundlessly into the moon shadow of the quaint little roof that stood over the well shaft. Behind it, the water bucket swung slightly where its shoulder had touched it. Possessed of a surprisingly tidy mind for a grave-robbing cannibal, the ghoul reached out and stopped it. It had already given orders that the stones in the well, some 30 feet down the shaft, would be replaced before morning, and was in no doubt that it would be obeyed. It was important that no trace was left of this journey. Across the green, the only light in any building burned in the windows of the old house at home. No doubt Parkin had interrupted his evening patrol for a quick half of bitter about 2 hours ago, and was now one of its many successors. The ghoul's long ears flicked back and forth as it listened to the police sergeant and anyone else in no hurry to go home, quietly talking. Nobody was saying their goodbyes. Excellent. Nobody was likely to exit the pub and see a lean, dark form dash from the cover of the wall across the green and down the road. The ghoul could feel the elixir working. The flaring colors of its dark, penetrating sight were becoming attenuated. It no longer loped, but was starting to walk more upright. Its skin was becoming lighter and more human in texture. Unexpectedly, it was also growing weaker. Humans had not a fraction of the strength of a ghoul, but as its ghoulish strength left it, it seemed to drain deep into the human strength that lay beneath it too. Soon the ghoul's indefatigable trot became a walk, then a slouch, and finally a stagger. It paused at a rock by the path, having left the road a mile or so before, and sat heavily upon it. It looked at its limbs, at their increased girth, their shortened length, and found them disgusting. At least the clothes would fit now. Dressed, although not a sartorial triumph in any sense, the ghoul lifted Cabal's bag and discovered it to be far heavier than it remembered. It ran its hand, it could no longer really be called a paw, over its head, and was gratified to discover hair growing there, so quickly that it could almost feel it doing so, driving out of his scalp like clay extruding from a nozzle. Belatedly, it realized that the sheer speed of the transformation was also the reason for the overwhelming weakness. It was too fast for his body to bear. If it didn't stop soon, it might kill him. He dared not abandon his bag, and half carried it, half dragged it for the next half-mile, until at last he saw the house. It looked cold and forbidding in the moonlight, but it was his salvation, and he must reach it if the long plan he had mapped out was to see fruition. It was another quarter of an hour before he finally reached the garden gate and slumped down by it, mortally tired. He tested his face. The muzzle had gone, and his skin felt like human skin, just as it had before his transformation, just as it had been before he had been forced to trick himself. Cause and effect were never certain things in the dreamlands, and what was objective there was subjective here. Time and place shifted in chaotic patterns between the two realms, and it had always astonished him that the ghouls, free travelers that they were, had never taken advantage of it. Now he had come within a hair's breadth of assuming full ghoulhood. He understood very well. The ghouls simply didn't care, any more than a rat on a warship or a spider in a clock might care about the greater possibilities of its environment. He, however, had realized how this could save him. He was unsure at what point he had realized this, or when he had acted upon it. Paradox had stolen the exact sequence of events from his mind, and he doubted it would do his sanity much good to try to reevaluate it. But what was sure was that he had acted upon it, and now the ghoul warrens housed among its many unpleasant material artifacts this one gloriously elegant temporal one. He knew Cabal would settle into the role of ghoul leader easily. After all, he always had. Cabal sat by the wall of his house and remembered how he had realized the truth of it from the depths of despair when the ghoul leader had stolen the elixir from him for no apparent reason. He had known what he must do, and he had done it with precision. The attack on the house in Arkham, making contact with the witch of Loneth, and being there to hint to himself about the sinew wood construct in the nameless city. He had known where he would descend into the crevasse in Mormo, and had marshaled his ghouls to harvest several thousand dead heads of hair to ensure he had a soft fall when the rope broke, as it always had, and it always would. He had not enjoyed deceiving himself into making the elixir, but it had been necessary, and after all, he had done the same to himself when he was at that point in the loop of events. All these things had happened before, and were already happening again, albeit in the subjective past. They were foretold and already lived, and it was to Cabal's advantage that they remained so. Once he had left the loop, however, Fate arose from her figurative armchair, stubbed out her figurative cigarette, put down her figurative newspaper, and started to take an interest in him again. Now he no longer knew the future, as was borne out by the evidence of him sitting at his garden gate, slowly dying. In the silver light, tiny faces peered under the gate at him. Bound into the limits of the garden by magic Cabal had used to contain them where he could keep an eye on them, the garden folk watched and speculated. "It's Johannes Cabal! Johannes Cabal!" they cried in tinkling high voices like the sounds of fairy bells. "He smells like a dead dog," said one. "He looks very ill," said another, then in a slightly calculating tone. "And weak." There was some excited muttering. Then they chorused, "Come into the garden, Johannes Cabal. We will help you to the door. We will help you in. We are your little friends." "And we won't eat you, honest," said a voice belonging to one of the less human-savvy fae. There was an angry shushing at the sound of the tiny fae creature being punched. Cabal had not needed the hint. The garden folk were capricious at the best of times, but at least they respected and feared his powers. Currently, though, he knew he couldn't intimidate a skittish kitten. He also knew that unless he got to his laboratory and made a simple counteragent to slow the elixir's effects to a bearable level, he might not live much longer. He had no choice but to attempt to bluff the garden folk into believing he was not as ill as he was. His master plan of deception and obscuration failed at the first step. He couldn't stand up. "Damn," he said out loud. "Damn, damn, damn." It had been such a good plan, too. He had fooled himself, after all. How difficult could it be to fool a bunch of criminally insane pixies? "Damn," he said once more, and lapsed into unconsciousness. He sat propped against the low garden wall, quietly dying. As he faded, he dreamed of how he had raised her from the dead, and how he had felt to see her alive and breathe again. How he had not cared about the years, but only about the result, and the truth that there were some people in this benighted world who were worthy of sacrificing oneself for. This was the second thing that he had denied Nyarlathotep, crawling chaos and bastard. And he might have laughed in his sleep as he dreamed of it. Slowly he slumped over and sank too deeply towards death to dream any more. For 5 more minutes he faded. A figure detached itself from the shadows beside the house and walked to him. Cabal was unaware as his eyelid was drawn back and the pulse at his throat checked. He didn't feel it when he was unceremoniously picked up and slung easily over the figure's shoulder. His bag gathered. The garden gate was open, and he was carried down the path to the front door of his house. The garden folk scattered in panic. They knew danger when they saw it, and the figure reeked of threat. The front door was locked. Cabal doubtless had the key about his person or in his bag, but the figure had neither the time nor the inclination to search. Instead, it put down Cabal's Gladstone, punched the door with its now free hand, smashing the bolt through the frame, picking up the bag again, and carried it with Cabal into the hallway past the door that still shuddered from the impact. The figure, a tall man in a long coat, didn't bother to secure the door. The house was warded against intrusions by the garden folk, but even if it hadn't been, none of them would have dared to enter while he was there. Stirred from deep sleep, Cabal was muttering in delirium, and the man listened intently without even having to put his ear to Cabal's feverishly quivering lips. Cabal was running through the last things he had been thinking about before passing out. The scheme to get into the house was now moot, but the cause and cure for his quickly evaporating life was not. The man listened gravely to the burbled imperatives. Time was short, it was true, but he proved remarkably rapid. He opened Cabal's bag, was only momentarily surprised to find a flaming skull in there, removed the notebook that Cabal had fastidiously kept even during his descent into ghoulhood, and flicked through it quickly. At least the relevant sections weren't encrypted. Cabal's failing intellect had prevented him from doing that. The man read quickly, stopping once to look at Cabal with disgust. He went to the bookshelves and took down a slim volume entitled A Treatise on the Induced Retrocessation of the Physiological Transformation in Cases of Lycanthropy, including notes on the metamorphic process catalyzed by ghoulish anthropophagy, by Eris Colpin. Then in long strides he was out of the room and up the stairs and to the attic laboratory. Cabal did not die that night, the next, or the next, but neither did he awaken fully. He was nursed through the illness by the man, fed slowly and patiently, like a baby, washed and looked after. Sometimes during the day, Cabal would almost manage to awaken and would look around his room before lapsing back into sleep, but the man was never there. The man looked after the house, too, repairing the front door, cleaning the rooms, and laying in provisions. One evening he opened Cabal's Gladstone bag and removed the skull of Hercusides. "Who's there?" Hercusides demanded. "There's something going on, isn't there?" "Isn't there?" Is there? The man did not answer, but instead carefully placed the skull with its cool blue-green flames in a varnished wooden box that had once contained a reflecting mirror galvanometer until Johannes Cabal had inadvertently destroyed it in an unhelpful if exciting experiment. The empty box had been left in a corner of the attic laboratory for years, which was where the man had discovered it. Ircusity's skull fitted neatly, and the heatless flames did not start a fire in the wood shavings the man had provided as packing. The lid was closed and clipped shut, and the box placed on the high shelf by the fireplace in the front room beside another wooden box of similar dimensions. Ircusities wasn't sure what was being done with him, but he was reasonably sure it was outrageous. "What is this? Is that you, Cabal? Speak to me, you vile man!" The stranger who had placed him there was already gone, but the other box, Ircusity's new neighbor, answered in a fashion. It whistled a slow, haunting, melancholy air that spoke of optimism through adversity. Ircusity's shouts grew quieter and died away altogether as he found himself listening. Finally he said, "You! Whoever you are, that tune, what is it?" The other box replied, its voice rich and mature. "Blimey, I'm a limey," it said. "What's a limey?" asked Ircusities. "Who's blimey?" "That doesn't matter," said the box, and began whistling again. Soon, when he'd heard the tune all the way through, Ircusities joined in. "4 days after he had collapsed at his own front gate, Johannes Cabal finally awoke fully. It was late evening, almost 11, according to the clock on the mantel, and for a moment he felt content. Then he realized he had no idea how he had got there, and his contentment quickly turned to concern. He was wearing pajamas, which he never wore because he had long since fallen out of the habit of wearing pajamas to bed, the closest thing he had to a decadent characteristic. They had been sitting in a drawer in his dresser for years. Why was he wearing them all of a sudden? Why was there a carafe of fresh water by his bed? There had been next to no coal when he had left on the Fear Institute expedition, and he had not bothered to order any, so why was there a full scuttle by a healthy fire in the grate? With some difficulty he sat up, and some ghoul instinct, still in place, sniffed the air. There was an inevitable sense of intrusion in the air. Somebody else was in his house. In his house! He looked at the desk and wondered if the interloper had searched it. If not, then the Italian revolver he had in the upper right-hand drawer would still be there. The door opened, and he had no chance either to reach the desk or pretend he was still asleep. The anger on his face at the intrusion into his home melted like wax beneath a blowtorch. Entirely forgetting himself, he gawped, and continued to gape as the man sat on the edge of his bed and looked at him without saying a word. It was Johannes Cabal who spoke first when his wits began to return, having been temporarily expelled by mountainous astonishment. "You!" he said at last, his voice thin and weak from illness and disuse. "It's you! But you're dead!" And that's the end. End of book. I told you the fourth one was called The Brothers Cabal. So, what did you think it was? Of course he's back. Vampires don't die. No. Not his horse. I told you guys that. The title of the fourth book would have given it away. It's called The Brothers Cabal. And I told you it was taking place at the same time the Fear Institute was. I know. So rude. Oh, it'll go into it. It'll go into it. We have a whole new problem. Remember when I said the book was changing directions, like the last two were sort of way different than the first three. I wasn't lying about that. The book changes direction drastically. We have a reoccurring character, and we have a whole other cast of people that you haven't even met yet coming up in the next one, and in the fifth book. So there's going to be new characters, there's going to be recurring characters, and not just Horst. And the whole system is going to be thrown off. So it's more anticlimactic than that. Don't have high hopes for him coming back being great, because it kind of wipes it out in like the first few pages. Like, that is a footnote compared to what the book is. Like, it's like, if you think the Brothers Cabal is like Horst coming back, like it sort of is, and it also isn't. You'll see. Horst comes back, but there's an introduction to a whole other problem. Whole new problem. We get a nemesis, not Satan. Satan and the Nyarlathotep aren't exactly nemesis worthy either. Because for you to be a nemesis, you have to care about each other just a little bit, at least enough to hate each other. But Nyarlathotep and Satan don't really care. They're like, he's a jerk, but who are you? Like, they don't. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that does not happen. No. That's not the way it opens. They do have a whole lot of, like, it's pretty great, though. They do squabble a bunch. Like, a bunch. It's funny. There's some very brotherly-esque squabbling going on, so you might enjoy that. I'm trying to remember if one of them punches the other. I think it may be there is something. I feel like one of them punches the other one, or at least comes close to hitting him. No, they have a fun time. They catch up, and they talk about girls, and they argue about stuff. And, I'm not even lying. That's the sad part. But yeah, it's very sibling rivalry-esque bullshit that happens later. So, it's fun. You'll like it. I promise you'll like it. It's different, but you'll like it. Do I keep freezing? Is it my internet? Am I good? Because it says I'm green, and I've been peeking at it. It hasn't done anything else. Am I not? Oof. Am I green? Am I good? Okay. Everybody started saying, one person said I was freezing, and then a bunch of you had confusing comments, and I didn't realize if they were about that or not. But I promise you'll dig it. And we have a short story for today, since I only read one chapter. We have 3 short stories left. Now, Death of Me, which takes place preceding Fear Institute. It could go either way. It's not necessary to read it beforehand, but it goes along with Fear Institute. There's just like an Easter egg, kind of. Now, and then there's 2 other short stories. There is Ouroboros Ozo and Long Spoon, that we have not read yet. Long Spoon is the longest, and Ouroboros Ozo is one of the shortest. Not the shortest, but one of the shortest, at least. And Death of Me is sort of in between. Now, I do have that queued up, actually, which I should access. Hold up. I have to read it off my laptop because there's not a physical there isn't a physical copy any place because it was never published. Is it on your end? Okay, I was like, wait, and is it me? Am I the problem? I don't want to be the problem. Let me get this up. Because my laptop acted super weird when I booted it up earlier. Okay. I gotta boot it up so we're ready to read it. I wanted to make sure that I had it pulled up because I couldn't remember if it's just locked or if I shut it down earlier. Ooh, what coffee comment? Someone had a coffee comment? Lady Aoife had a coffee comment and I didn't see it? Where was it? What'd you say? Oh, that... Oh, yay, coffee. I just found it. Also, thank you. I will keep an eye out for it. I'm actually drinking a half of yours today. It's half yours, half Bushwhacker. Is what's in the mug over here. So I'm digging it. So much coffee. Thank you for funding my caffeine addiction. Thank you, Lady Aoife, especially, and Swiftblood, who have kept me perfectly caffeinated. And my car will work, so I can actually go to the post office. Isn't that exciting? Because I haven't been able to go anywhere because my car has been totally busted. So, you got your cheeseburger? We all ready to go? No. We don't have to go right now. I think we got a few minutes. One of the batteries I got earlier. There we go. I gotta switch out my batteries. So, Bushwhacker is life. So, blood, I don't know how to tell you this. Bushwhacker is one of my favorites, and it just makes everything awesome. And I really like using the kind of Lady Aoife got me. It goes as a good espresso base with everything. So I flip-flop it with a lot. Yes. Tea Galaxies is really good. It's really good if you get it. It's amazing. It's really good. Yes. I really hope my laptop doesn't die. Actually, I don't know what the charge is on this. Oh, okay, it's fully charged. It's fully charged. Should be fine. Should be fine. We're good, I think. Gonna be good. So, what did you all think of Fear Institute? I'm really interested in your thoughts on this because I'm really interested in your thoughts on this because it's my personal favorite. Do you liked it? Awesome. I figured anybody who is into fantasy, and I know a lot of you are, that a lot of you would really enjoy it. And it's... Yes. Bushwhacker and a plushie. Yeah, it's like such a high fantasy volume. And like, I kind of thought, like, as I was reading it the first time, when I read it the first time, I was like, he's not really dead. He didn't really die. This is all a dream or something stupid. And then I got initially kind of mad when he did wake up, and I was like, I knew it. This was a cop-out. This was bullshit. And then the ghoul twist happened, and I was like, okay, well, I didn't see that particularly. I figured the ghoul was another manifestation, And it was also going to be Nyarlathotep in like a weird way. Like, I knew something was up with Bosie, and I knew he was probably Nyarlathotep because, and when I figured it out was the ship. When he was sobbing, but he somehow knew Shadrach was already dead. That was when I like figured it out for me when I first read the book. I was like, something's up with that guy. But I didn't pick up on the pets thing and their pets for the spider ant baby things. But I did pick up that something was up with Bosie, and I thought that the ghoul had something to do with Nyarlathotep, and Bosie had something to do with Nyarlathotep. And I figured because as much as Lovecraft like has so many entities within it, I thought there was also a potential that the ghoul was another Lovecraft eldritch god. And I was trying to figure out who the ghoul was the entire time. Ray got it before I did. So, because I did not know. I did not see that ending. And so I was like, wait, now when he did turn into a ghoul, I was like, oh, he's the ghoul. He's the ghoul from another time. This is a time loop thing. But I didn't get it initially, so. You didn't get it the first time. I'm gonna admit, I read all the books all the way through. Because whenever I really like a book, I'll look up the author and I'll read everything they've ever written. So I looked up every book in this series and was like, I gotta marathon all of this shit right now. And I read all the short stories. I looked them up in order. I read all the books and then I read all the short stories. But I read all the books in order first. And I'm going to admit, when I first read completely through the books and I found out there were short stories, I went back, I read all the short stories, and then I went back and read everything in order again. So I read Johannes for almost a straight year at one point. Yeah, Ray won. Oh, thank you. I appreciate the compliment on the cosplay. But I was really interested to see. That's why I was like, don't read ahead. I want your all's genuine reactions on this. If you haven't read it before, please don't read it. It's my favorite one, and I want to share it with you all. Yeah, the first one was what hooked me. Oh, thank you for the show. Thank you. I appreciate that. The first one was what hooked me. And then once I was hooked, I was like, and I read the second one and I was like, well, this is kind of different. And by the time I got to the third one, I was like, oh, these are all different genres. Like, he literally took a character and input it into every separate genre he could think of. You know what I mean? Like, he took horror. He took mystery. He took fantasy. He did all those in order, and I was like, wait, what the? That is so cool that you chose a genre difference for each book. So they're all drastically different from each other, and yet has the very same tone and like a very condescending, dry tone, even just as a narration. It's all very well done. That's what I really like about it. Oh yeah, I finished that one in like a couple days, and I was immediately like, how can I get the second one? I was going to Barnes and Noble and like ordering them all like immediately. I was like, I need every book in this series now. I need it now. So, and then when I figured out you couldn't get all the short stories, I was looking them up on the internet. I was looking to see if they had them as ebooks, and then I was looking to see if they had them on the internet. That's how I had to find House of Gears. And it was harder to find House of Gears the first time around. This time it was so easy. I just Googled it and it came right up. I was like, man, I had to do, years ago when I read this, I had to do a whole scavenger hunt for this bitch. And now it just comes right up. This is easy mode, please. You ever been down a Google search rabbit hole trying to look for a specific thing? I got people making doll houses out of gears, and I'm like, this isn't what I wanted. this wasn't what I wanted. Like, you could, it was really annoying the first time I had to try and find it. So it was easy mode this time around. I was like, because I didn't keep it. I couldn't. Like, it was on the internet. It wasn't available as an e-read book or a download or anything. So I had to search again, and I was really dreading it when I had to find it for you guys. I was like, man, I'm going to have to go and find this short story again. And surprisingly, it was very easy. Yeah, well, this was also quite a few years ago when, like, Google still was, like, reliable to an extent, but especially with, like, highly obscure terms or, like, artwork or stuff like that, it's extremely hard to find again, like, 5-7 years ago or something. It wasn't like 10 years ago or anything, but, like, it was still, like, nobody had ever heard of it, and it was in a defunct magazine. So I was like, great, I don't want to purchase this magazine. I, in fact, did try to purchase the magazine, and I couldn't get a copy of it anywhere, and I had to keep searching. But it was really easy this time around. They had a digital copy of the old magazine that it was originally printed in, so that was fun. I also had to find the Ereshkigal working and a compilation of other short stories called The Way of the Wizard. And that was the only thing it was ever published in, so I was like, you're telling me I have to get a whole I've never read anything else in this book except for the Ereshkigal work, and that was the only reason I bought it. That's the only reason I wanted it for. Was so I could find. I should read it. It's been sitting in my Amazon account for a while, and I was like, I should really read that, and then I don't. I never do. It's just something else that's, rotting away in my to be read pile, as I'm sure you all can relate. So I'm responsible. You want me to read the whatever the fuck is in the rest of this book? I don't even know what's in there. You want me to blind read whatever the hell's in this book? You've been there. You get it. Yeah, everybody has that to be read pile. That's a little freakish. As I say, looking at my physical to be read pile, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 books high on my desk right now. Yes. You mean my entire house? That makes me feel slightly better. I only have 9 books in a weird tower sitting on my desk right now. Nody was over yesterday and I was like, do you want to see my to be read pile? Because they loaned me a book and they were like, have you read it? And I was like, nah. And they were like, where is it? Did you even start on it? I was like, yeah, I totally did. And they were like, you sure? And I was like, I have. And I took them in here. I was like, look at this to be read pile. And they were like, what the fuck? Hey, I'm bad, not terrible. No, I'm joking. I'm not to insinuate that you're terrible for having 27 in your to be read pile. I take it back. No, but I actually read pretty quickly, and I'm not averse to reading new content. I know some people, it's really hard to get into, like, a new book or whatever. Like, you consistently reread what comforts you, like what's comfort content for you, instead of reading something you're not sure you're going to enjoy or like. And I feel that to an extent. There's some times where I'm like, I just want to reread Johannes and sleep. And that's what's going to make me feel better. That's what's going to make me feel better. And then if I start it, I have to finish it. Like, I'm no heathen. So then I just reread Johannes for the 5th time. But a lot of the time I do read new stuff. I have one that I just started that's like a fantasy novel, and it's okay. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see how we like it. Yeah, my Amazon account is a little ridiculous, says the librarian. Yeah, occasionally I'll get like a bad rec, and I'm like, no, no. I just never take that person's word again. You get you get like 2 chances max on recommending me shit. If you mess up that second time, never taking your recommendation. Just like that one time that Nodi recommended me a book and it just turned out to be like all smut. And I was just like, this wasn't what I wanted. I was like, I said I wanted a good fantasy novel, not whatever this is. And they were like, it is fantasy. I was like, I mean, yeah, but like with very loose constraints. Oh, you got that curse. See, that's the thing is, I will do that to myself. I should do that. I should get the entire series and then read it. But then again, I also will find a really cool book that comes really well recommended. I'll read it and I'll really dig it. And then I'll look up. And then I'll find out that they've only had one book published and they do plan on making it into a series, but the next one's not going to come out for like another 2 years. And then I've really done it to myself. Because then we. Yes. Oh, hello. You're not here to walk on the keyboard, are you? Pond. Yeah. Yeah, maybe not walk on the keyboard. You can lay down up here. You want to lay down up here? I'm going to use this keyboard. So if you, well, you can hop up here and lay up here on the blanket that you love clawing up. You want to claw up a blanket? Yeah, you do. You bet your ass you do. Come on. Oh, not on the laptop, please. Don't get on the laptop. Hi. Pawn's here. Oh. Pawn says hello, everyone. Making her weekly visit. Yeah, you want to say hi? Everyone loves you, Pond. Yeah, that's laptop. Lucy ran away. VC, what? What answering VC? Alternatively, get their toy. I know it's in the living room because she left it in the living room. You want to know what the book from Nodi is? Okay, sorry, I had to scroll back to see what you guys were talking about. I will give you the title of the book later in the redacted. It wasn't even a bad book. Like, you can tell it was also a part of a larger series. And it was definitely like a part of a large fantasy series, and it was just one book of many. And there was definitely plot to it, but it was just supplemented by some very upsetting. And I was like, why? And they were like, I just forgot how prevalent that was in that book. And I was like, did you? Did you forget? And they were like, yeah, I haven't read it in ages. I just know I really like it. Aww. Lucy hears you and she's very upset. I think she's gonna lay down on my lap. Oh, well, no, she's gonna headbutt the keyboard again. No, it was not. The one from Nodi didn't have any like Lovecraft. I am reading Lovecraft in the VC if you all want to hear it. If you don't want to hear it, I'm not going to read it. But like, if you do want that extra content, I can stream in VC and you can hear some extra Lovecraft stuff. I've yet to read Pickman's Model, and I really want to read that one because that one's really dope and I really like that one. And that one is what I think heavily influenced part of the ghoul story, or the inspiration for the way the ghouls are described. So yeah, I'd be happy to do that if you guys want to hear it. I also, I don't want this to drain too much battery, but I do have Death of Me opened up here. If we want to read that. Do we want to do that? Is everybody ready? Everybody on it? Everybody get your smoothie, your pets, good pond, laying contentedly. Really hope she doesn't try and get on this laptop when I pick it up. This is going to throw my lighting off again. All right. Hear me too. Okay. Johannes Cabal didn't enjoy his little trips into town. The town had a name, but he didn't tend to use it, in much the same way that he didn't tend to refer to the local village by any other name but the village, and the nearest city as the city on those rare occasions when he had cause to mention them at all. His strange house, tall and soot-stained as if torn from the middle of a terrace and placed brick-perfect in the valley where nobody else cared to live, once, at any rate, he had turned up, and where no chapel bells could ever be heard, no matter what the prevailing wind, his strange house provided him with privacy. It could not, however, provide him with food. For this he required the shops of the village. There had been that early attempt to poison him, but after the trouble the village had experienced filling the vacancy for grocer, no further trouble had come from that direction. Nor could it provide him with certain supplies more esoteric than assam tea and crumpets, if he required, for example, a particularly torturous retort replacing after yet another small disturbance in his laboratory, then there were certain glassblowers in the city who could create it without asking more questions than were absolutely necessary. The city was a faceless place, uncaring and uninterested in the foibles, often unspeakably foul foibles, of its visitors and denizens, a great shuddering ennui that city dwellers call being cosmopolitan, and believe a virtue. Such are the delusions and madness of crowds. Cabal enjoyed the anonymity of the city, but was always mindful to keep his visits short. With enough provocation, even the most urbane sophisticate seemed able to lay hands upon a pitchfork and burning torch at the very short notice. This left the town useful for its intermediate requirements. It is in the nature of towns, however, to throw up the occasional surprise, small hints to their greater metropolitan ambitions. The local town, for example, contained a hat maker called Jones. While this fact is not so remarkable in itself, this particular hatter maintained a sideline of such startling occultness that the very method by which Cabal discovered it would be a lengthy account in itself. It would not, however, be an engaging one, so we must be satisfied that Jones had a sideline, Cabal had an interest, and they both had a financial understanding. Twice a year, Cabal would make his way to town and enter the hattery through the grimy alley backing it. They would meet in the storeroom, and with no pleasantries, Cabal would give Jones a sum of money, Jones would give Cabal several small paper packages, Cabal would arrange the date of his next visit as he carefully stored the packages in his Gladstone bag, and then he would leave the way he had come, again without pleasantries. Cabal didn't enjoy these visits for a variety of reasons. He didn't enjoy the trip. While the majority was aboard a suburban train, the stretch between his house and the village was 4 miles along a country road, muddy half the year and dust for the rest. He would have taken his bicycle, but for the fact that the last time he had left it at the station, he had returned to find its spokes kicked out and its tires slashed. It appeared that the respect the villagers held for him, respect, here used as a synonym for fear, did not extend to his bicycle. He had not yet got around to identifying and formulating a punishment for the malefactor, but when he did, he would be sure to make it more than sufficient to prevent any further interference with his property. Nor did he like the town itself very much. Caught in the sticky patch between a collapse in the local light industry and whatever was going to come along to replace it, the place was coasting along on its municipal laurels, if one can imagine such a thing. The streets were swept rarely and with little conviction. The shop windows collected dead flies, and past dignitaries struck in dramatic poses to exhort a missing populace to greater things looked down upon an empty town square. But these long-dead orators gathered no crowds now, only pigeon guano. Jones insisted that Cabal approach the shop by the alley backing it, an exasperating insistence given the infrequency of passerby on the high street to the front. Paranoia was the third of the reasons Cabal disliked his visits to Jones' shop. Not his own. It is not paranoia when one believes people are out to get one and one happens to be a necromancer. It is a certainty. No, Cabal harbored suspicions of Jones's state of mind. On his last visit, Jones had spent almost the entire time at the window, peering through the dusty blinds into the street. Impatiently gesturing Cabal to leave the money, impatiently gesturing Cabal to take the packages. Cabal didn't take well to being impatiently gestured at, and so prolonged his stay. "Why so eager to see me go, Herr Jones?" Cabal asked, stowing the paper packages into his bag with exaggerated care. Jones had looked at him, slightly shocked, and Cabal had realized that he wasn't aware of how obvious his behavior was. "The things I get for you, Mr. Cabal. The materials You appreciate their rarity?" This wouldn't be an opening to a conversation about rising prices, would it? No, but there is a great danger. The things I have to do. Terrible crimes against the Fae. The Seelie and the Unseelie, they have long memories. Cabal had joined him at the window, and they had looked out together into the withered town. "Not a good location for fairy rings, is it? I dare say the civic fathers overlooked the inclusion of sylvan glades and shady bowers in their municipal planning, too." He had gone back to packing his bag, this time working quickly, the sooner to be quit of that place. "You worry too much, Jones. I've had run-ins with them in the past, and they're all twinkle dust and no trousers. The Fae, that is, not the civic fathers, the Fae's powers are on the wane. Places like this are crushing the life from them. You'd be wiser to focus your energies upon keeping your customers happy, in both of your lines." In hindsight, perhaps Jones had taken that as a threat, and Cabal now regretted his choice of words. He suspected his next visit would be all the less pleasant because of it. And now that time had arrived. He stepped out onto his doorstep, checked that the door was locked, picked up his Gladstone bag, and set off. As he walked down his garden path, he was very aware of countless small eyes watching him from the concealment of the flower beds. The things in the garden were, by strict dictionary definition, fairies themselves, but they would have as soon doused themselves in holy water as worn a bluebell for a hat, or any of the other mimsy nonsense usually associated with their kith. He didn't see them often, but the last one he'd caught a glimpse of had been wearing a rat skull as a cap over its sharp little face. If they had been useful as a source of the specialist materials that Jones supplied, Cabal would have been quite happy, possibly even delighted, to cull the whole snickering mob of them. They were, however, of the basest kind, and any strange essences he might have been able to wring from them would be polluted and likely to cause problems with Cabal's current line of research. All things considered, Cabal was quite happy to let Jones do all of the hard work of traipsing around fairy mounds with butterfly net and mangle. Besides, the things in his garden had their uses. Not many salesmen ever reached his door, and the ones who did never made it back to the gate. Today, there were none of the usual tiny good-natured jeers from the things of the garden about his parentage, personal habits, and appearance. Perhaps they sensed his business. He closed the garden gate behind him and set off towards the village station. Walking helped him to think, and today he was thinking about what an unpleasant day it was to be walking. The air hung humid and still, and he was disagreeably aware that he was sweating. Cabal regarded sweating as one of nature's more subtle revenges upon humanity and its pretensions to prime species. It is hard to regard oneself as civilized when one oozes in warm weather. Cabal was doubly cursed by his wardrobe. A black suit and hat, a snap-brimmed thing of American lineage he had bought in a moment of madness at Jones' shop, black shoes, socks, and a thin cravat. It soaked up the sun, and Cabal perspired, his habitually bad mood sinking from the dreadful towards the foul. If the coach hadn't been such a surprise, he would have been glad for the shade it abruptly cast upon him. As it was, he whirled as the daylight was blotted out and stepped back, causing the sun to fall once again upon his face. Through his blue-tinted glass spectacles, the coach body was black and without detail, a sudden phenomena as unexpected as a rain of fish. He looked up and down the road. How had he not heard its approach? Why was there no dust in the air to mark its passage? He moved off to one side, the better to examine it. The coach was a well-appointed landau in the Sefton style, sitting motionless on its helically sprung suspension. In the traces were two huge black stallions, Belgian blacks, unless Cabal was mistaken, a breed often used for drawing hearses. Black as the horses, black as the livery, was the look the coachman was giving him. There was nothing individually disreputable or malevolent in the man's clothing. The red coat and cape, the thick scarf over his lower face, the diminished top hat of the Mueller sort, and all as black as a banker's soul. But the way they hung on him, gathered on him like crows on a gibbet, was almost unnerving. Cabal felt ill-matched to the weather in the suit, but this man was wearing a coat and a scarf. They regarded each other for a long moment, Cabal's eyes guarded behind blue glass, the coachman's invisible behind heavy goggles. There was no inkling of intent or attitude in his posture until finally he turned away to gaze moodily or philosophically. It was impossible to tell, at the horses' arses arrayed before him. Cabal felt he should have been insulted. Yet somehow, as he looked at the coachman's hunched shoulders, it seemed like a waste of energy, like taking offense at a weathercock for swinging away. Actually, now that he looked more closely at those hunched shoulders, he had a momentary impression of movement beneath the cloth, from the shoulders down, under the obscuring mass of the coat, as if, fancifully enough, the man had wings. Not fanciful by nature, Cabal immediately turned his attention to the coach itself. As he did so, the door opened. He noted that it had done so without the door handle moving, which seemed ill-mannered. Inside, there was little but gloom, shadows of the bright day, feeling his unusual state of irritation with the world, and most of the things in it settle upon him like a cloud of lice. Cabal took off his sunglasses, the better to see within. The woman was beautiful. Of that there was no doubt. She was white and red and black. Her skin, her hair and lips, her dress. And her eyes were dark too, and as soulless as a waxwork. To look into them was to look into space. Despite the warmth of the day and the sweat that dampened his shirt, he felt a strange, chilling frisson that, while not entirely unpleasant, was still some way short of pleasant. They looked at each other for a long moment, she in her widow's weeds, he in his disgruntlement. "If you're looking for the cemetery," he said finally, "you're on entirely the wrong road." He made a mental note to check the recent burials for likely experimental material. "Get in," she said, ignoring the comment. "You and I, we are traveling the same road, at least for a little way." As it happened, this was self-evidently true, but Cabal did not care to jump into the carriages of strangers. That way lay a sack over the head, a cosh to the skull, and, if he was lucky, a shallow grave in scrubland. "I'll walk," he said, turned, took a step, and found himself sitting down opposite the woman. The door swung shut and the carriage rattled on. Cabal looked about in consternation. At no point had he decided to place his foot upon the step, hoist himself into the carriage, and take the seat. No matter. He would just leave. It would not be the first time he jumped from a moving carriage. He reached for the handle and discovered that there wasn't one. He paused for a furious moment. He could search for one, but this was all looking very much like a fait accompli. Scrabbling round at the door would probably just make him appear an idiot, even more than an idiot who enters a carriage without meaning to. Instead, he sat back and looked at the woman steadily. There was an element of glaring in the look, but he couldn't help that. "Thank you for your offer. If you'd be so kind as to drop me off at the railway station, I should be most obliged." They traveled in silence for all of 2 minutes before the woman spoke, her voice quiet and musical. "This is a lonely road you travel, Mr. Cabal." Ah, thought Cabal, so begins the double talk. I shall have none of it. "You clearly know who I am. I don't believe that you simply happened to be passing, and I do not believe that I could have made such a mess of the simple act of avoiding joining you in here without assistance. I am a busy man." He saw no evidence of a wedding ring beneath the black lace of her gloves, and ventured a "Fräulein, I would ask of you that you dispense with your attempts at tact, disingenuity, and abstruse conversation. If you have something to say, say it." To his great and rising irritation, she was not at all put out, but only smiled sweetly, as at a small child who has made an imperfect attempt upon a 3-syllable word. They traveled in silence for a further 2 minutes. Finally, the woman spoke again, her voice quiet and musical. "This is a lonely road you travel, Mr. Cabal." Cabal was assailed by a strong sense of déjà vu, not simply from the repetition of the words, but also from the small hillock, topped by an old elm, that he could see out the window. He was sure he had been looking at that exact tree when she had spoken the last time. He began to understand the rules of this game, and having no desire to spend the rest of the day seeing the same old elm and the same hillock, he decided that he would play, albeit not in the most sporting frame of mind. "I prefer to travel alone." Infuriatingly, her smile deepened. "But was that always the way? In your dreams, is that the way still? Or do you wish to go back a ways, to twist a thread whole, that cruel Atropos?" Cabal's lips grew thin, his color pallid. "You, madam, are on dangerous ground," he said, so quietly that it was lost in the hoofbeats and creaking of wood. Yet she seemed to hear him, and yet she didn't care. "That cruel Atropos cut so short." Her eyes shined as she spoke, harsh, icy crystals of something like cruelty in every syllable. "Shut up!" Cabal was suddenly furious, his tightly reined anger breaking loose. "Shut your verdammt mouth! You think you can just kidnap me in this fashion and I don't know who you are?" He fumbled in his pocket and took out a small piece of pitted metal that he placed with venomous swiftness on her pale flesh, between cuff and glove. She watched him with amused eyes as he, face white with fury, breath shuddering, pressed the metal harder onto her skin. "What do you expect to happen she asked, politely interested. Cabal's fury left him as quickly as it had materialized. He looked at the piece of metal, her wrist, the metal again, and finally dropped it into his pocket. He swept back his short blonde hair as he regained his composure. "I'm sorry, Fräulein. Your questions were too impertinent to tolerate, but still, his loss of control had frightened him far more than it had her." "What was that?" she muttered calmly, pointing vaguely at his pocket. "Meteoric cold iron. Forgive me. I assumed that you were of the Fae. It would have burned you if you were. I was obviously mistaken." He coughed, embarrassed. "My current line of experimentation, I almost expect reprisals." The elm tree on its hillock went by again. "You are right in one respect, Mr. Cabal. Time is short, perhaps shorter than you realize. We have touched briefly, if not briefly enough, upon your past, and you speak of your present endeavors. But she reached to the side of the carriage and drew down a folding tabletop until it lay across her lap. Then, nonchalantly and without affectation, she produced a deck of cards from thin air and spread them face down. Taking the last card, she slid it beneath the end of the spread and flipped it over. The cards obediently flowed onto their backs in a wave, showing their faces. Cabal winced slightly. Tarot cards. "I deal with people's futures." Or, she held up the card she was holding so Cabal could see its face. "The lack of same." It was the 13th card, Death. Unusually, death was not represented by a skeleton with a scythe. Instead, the card showed a carriage upon a lonely road. From its window, a woman in black and red and white looked out. "Ah," said Cabal. She did him the courtesy of looking down as she gathered up the cards, affecting to ignore his confusion and dismay. "You and I are not enemies, Johannes." She looked up and smiled brightly at him. "You don't mind if I call you Johannes, do you?" Cabal, finding diplomacy and self-preservation might well be the same thing at the moment, did not. "We are not enemies, no matter how much you might believe that. Your enemy is time." She gestured out of the window where the elm was just going by again. "A nicety." Cabal was recovering his composure. "Not at all. A fundamental point." She held out the cards to him, lips pursed. He cut the deck. She smiled pleasantly and started to lay them out. "Nobody knows when your time is up." "You do." "I don't." She finished laying out the cards into a fortune-teller's spread. She saw his raised eyebrow. "No, I don't. But when the time comes, it's clear enough. There are always indicators. Of past," she tapped the cards as she spoke, "present, and my abiding interest, the future." She flipped the card over. Cabal craned his neck to look. "Card 10, the wheel. That's good, I believe." "For most people who don't do what you do, it is. Do you believe in karma?" "No." "That's a shame, because this card does." She started to gather up the cards again. "I think we need to exercise some alternative technique." He stopped her. "Please humor my curiosity." He turned the card marking his past. "The Lovers, Johannes. My, she remarked mildly. He sniffed and turned the card marking his present. "Card 1, the Conjurer. Ha!" She took the card and looked at it for a moment before turning its face towards him. "Are you sure?" Cabal looked again. Card 0, the Fool. She slid the card back into the deck and shuffled it. I always get them mixed up myself. Cabal watched her for a moment before asking, Why this concern? There are many within my profession, such as it is, well, a few, at any rate. Do they all receive visitations, such as this? No, Johannes, they do not. You are a special case. Special. That sounded dangerous. In what way? But the woman wasn't listening. Before returning the card marking Cabal's pass to the deck, she had flipped it in her hand and was looking intently at it. Just special, she said distractedly. She returned it to the deck and gave Cabal a look he couldn't decipher at all. Give me your hand, she said tonelessly, unsmiling. With mild trepidation, Cabal held out his right hand. She took off her gloves before taking his and hers. Her skin was smooth and cool. Cabal found himself thinking of the statue of a medieval lady buried by her husband in a church crypt that he had once visited, lady-size in marble. If the woman noticed the faint shudder that ran through him, she didn't show it. Long middle finger, strong thumb. Cabal was interested despite himself. Meaning what? Meaning that you're probably very good at flicking things. Her smile returned, more mischievous than before. Oh, and some other things, but they're not relevant. She turned his hand palm upwards and the smile vanished. She looked at him very suspiciously. All of which brings us to my interest in you, Johannes Cabal. Yes, your interest in me, replied Cabal evenly, while wondering how far he would get if he flung himself out of the carriage window. He had a depressing sense that the glass wouldn't shatter. She turned his hand so she could see the palm and indicated an area from the web between the thumb and forefinger down in an arc to the middle of the wrist. Do you know what's missing from here? You know, the gypsy Pelengro neglected to mention any... She stopped him. I've heard about your brand of wit. Keep it to yourself. She indicated his palm again. You're walking around without a lifeline, Johannes. That simply isn't done. Lifeline? Baffled, he took his hand back and studied his palm. Now that she mentioned it, it didn't look nearly as cluttered as perhaps it should. He had memories of a line running just as she had shown him, running around the base of the thinner eminence. Now there was nothing but the expected fine geography of minute peaks and troughs. He looked up at her suspiciously. A freakish happenstance, nothing more. Why your interest? Not just a freakish happenstance, Johannes. It's against the rules. Whose rules? Mine. And I tend to have the last word in disputes. Now, how did you happen to lose your lifeline? Think carefully now. The smile was back. Cabal had a sense of a cat trifling with a mouse or a vole or some other small rodent, and he didn't care for it at all, no matter who she was. I dislike being toyed with, he said sharply. I know you do, she replied, as if speaking to a 4-year-old. She dropped the demeanor like a mask, but kept a colder incarnation of the smile. I know a great deal about you. I know you think you can cheat me. I have cheated you. I died. I got over it. You managed it once. Don't get all cocky and think you can manage it again. You haven't cheated anything at all, only postponed the inevitable. Which brings us back. She took his hand again and levered it over so she could see his palm. She did it with such unexpected strength that Cabal gasped involuntarily. To this, she smiled without a shred of humor. What shall we do to make things right again, Johannes? She wasn't releasing her grip, and Cabal found the pain was escalating. It was hard to accept that the young, if only in appearance, lady sitting opposite him was applying the sort of pressure more usually associated with bull gorillas was something to prove. He was past pain now, tending into the foothills of agony. "Are you open to suggestions?" he managed without sobbing. "No. On this occasion, I think I already have the solution." She placed the tip of her free thumb gently on the skin between the bases of his thumb and forefinger. Then, with a sudden vicious push, she drove her nail into the flesh. Cabal's agony rocketed from the merely very unpleasant to the incandescent in a heartbeat. He couldn't draw breath to scream. His feet scrabbled helplessly on the carriage floor. His free hand grabbed the edge of the seat, and his fingers dug into the upholstery. He could feel the bones crushing together within her grip, could feel them breaking and breaking again. He wanted to collapse, but she held his hand as effortlessly immobile as if she really were that marble statue. Held his hand free from the slightest quiver as she drew her nail across his palm, skirting the thinner eminence, slowly and deliberately cutting his hand open. The flesh peeled back beneath her nail, sharper than any scalpel, peeled back the subcutaneous layer, the flesh beneath, musculature, blood vessels parting down to the white bone in its red setting. Blood sluiced down his wrist, soaking his shirt sleeve. Suddenly he was in the road, rolling face down in the dust. His bag landed with a thump beside his head as he blinked away tears of pain. As he hugged and cosseted his maimed hand to his chest, he heard her say, "Remember, Cabal, you haven't cheated anything at all, only postponed the inevitable. Those are the rules." He rolled over, spitting foul invectives in 3 dead languages, and found he was cursing a milestone. Of the carriage, the horses, the coachman, and the passenger, there was no sign at all. He was past being surprised. It didn't surprise him that the milestone showed that his lengthy ride in the carriage had carried him less than half a mile. It didn't surprise him that, on turning, he found himself facing a small hillock topped with an old elm. It didn't surprise him when he risked a glance at his crushed and slashed hand that he blinked. No, he concluded. Actually, this was quite surprising. His hand seemed unmarked, undamaged. No mangled fingers, no bloody rivulet trailing from his grip, no red-soaked sleeve, nothing at all, except... He angled his hand to examine the palm more closely in the sunlight, except that now he had a lifeline. It looked like it had always been there. It looked as if it belonged. Apart from the slight itching tingle that traveled through the skin, there was nothing to tell it apart from any other line upon his hand. He frowned. All this trouble for a crease in the skin? The attention of a higher power for this? He rubbed experimentally at it, but it remained. Cabal took out his pocket watch. His capacity to accept the inexplicable that morning had been raised to such a high mark that he hardly registered more surprise than warranted a slight sniff when he discovered that a little less than 2 minutes had passed since he had checked it, moments before the carriage had appeared. He still had time to get to the station, but he would still have to walk. Picking up his bag, Johannes Cabal started along the road once more. After he had been let into the storeroom to the rear of the hatter's shop, Cabal dropped his bag heavily on an old work table and leaned there, both palms upon the tabletop, while he marshaled himself. "I've experienced a very bad day thus far, Mr. Jones. I hope you are not going to add to my sorrows." When he received no reply, he turned his head to look at the nervous hatter. Jones hardly seemed to be listening. He was at his habitual place at the window, twitching the blinds. Cabal bit back his frustration with the man's lack of focus. It had taken a long time to cultivate Jones. to make him trust Cabal enough to use his peculiar talents to supply Cabal's needs. As it was, Cabal was coming to the conclusion that the whole line of investigation might be fundamentally flawed, and that he would be bringing it to a halt soon enough anyway. Still, it was worth the extinction of a few dozen more fluttering woodland types, to be sure. When Cabal had read Peter Pan as a boy, he had found himself thinking, "Yes, I do believe in fairies, but I still want you to die." "Well, enough of the pleasantries," said Cabal, when he still had no reply. "Have you gathered my supplies, Herr Jones?" Jones still did not reply. "What precisely are you looking at?" Cabal asked, joining him at the window. They gazed down into the dusty, uninteresting street. It looked uninteresting, but for the dustiness. Cabal felt unilluminated and strangely out of sorts. He'd felt unpleasantly detached from the full experience of reality ever since that nonsense in the carriage with... He looked down at his lifeline. He hadn't even noticed that it had gone. When he had, for the lack of a better term, died that time, the state of his palm print on returning from that dark veil of, ironically enough, no return had not been much of a concern. Now he couldn't stop sneaking faux casual glances at his palm. "I fear death, Mr. Cabal," said Jones quietly, his eyes still upon the empty street. The words so closely matched Cabal's own thoughts that he was hardly aware that he had been spoken at all. "I was dead once," said Cabal distractedly, his attention upon his hand. He didn't see Jones' sudden, frightened glance at him. "Years ago. An experiment. I suspended my vital signs for 9 minutes and 44 seconds. I was looking for inspiration and understanding." The sight of his restored lifeline fascinated him. "I didn't find one. The laboratory grew dark, and then I awoke. Only my instruments assured me that I hadn't simply fallen asleep." Did you see anything?" Jones was terrified to ask, terrified not to. "No, nothing at all. No afterlife, although there is a hell." "A hell? How do—" "I've seen it. I've visited. I was alive on that occasion. It wasn't a pleasant day trip. It wasn't a pleasant year." He frowned. This was a conundrum. "I wonder how it was that I didn't see anything. I would have certainly—" "Oh, of course." He smiled to himself. How had he forgotten that small detail? "I had no soul." It was a small omission. If he had continued the sentence a little further to include, "but I have one now," things might have turned out differently. Cabal realized that later when he analyzed the day's events, but right then it seemed an unimportant point, a tiny bit of happenstance that for scientific reasons he had seen fit to sell away his soul, and that later, for scientific reasons, he had seen fit to recover it. He certainly didn't appreciate its significance at the time, when it might have done some good. The sight of Jones going quite mad with fear unduly distracted him from that conclusion. "You!" said Jones, backing away. "It's you!" "Of course it's me," replied Cabal. This, he was later to realize, was exactly the wrong thing to say at that juncture. Jones spoke, but it was in such a paroxysm of dread and terror that the words fell over one another and became shrill, sobbing gibberish. Cabal watched him, utterly nonplussed. What had gotten into the man? Perhaps, Cabal conjectured with a growing sense of threat, Jones's paranoia had gone too far. Perhaps he, Cabal, had asked Jones to risk his neck once too often. Perhaps Jones had been keeping himself busy between excursions and the rare occasions when anybody actually wanted a hat by constructing an imaginary world of menace and conspiracy, a world that Cabal had accidentally tapped into with his apparently ill-omened comment. What happened next happened quickly, and Cabal was hardly aware of the chain of events even as they occurred. He simply responded to stimuli, reasoned rapidly and without reflection, and acted upon that reasoning. Jones continued to move away from him until he reached the end of the table, his eyes flickering down, and he reached for the handle of one of the table's drawers. Cabal watched him with cautious curiosity, but no real sense of danger. Then the pain began. It was the living echo of the agony he had felt earlier that same day, burning across his hand as if the flesh was being laid open with a blade of frozen vitriol. He gasped with its suddenness and gripped the stricken hand with the other as he looked down at the open palm. What he saw first confused, then horrified him. His lifeline was shortening before his eyes, burning like a fast fuse across the skin. He could see the crease vanishing in a bead of boiling blood, leaving nothing but smooth skin behind it. He looked up. Jones had the drawer open, looking furtively at Cabal as he searched in it. Cabal reached for his bag, undid its strap and buckle in 2 fast twitches, shook it open. Jones had found what he was looking for, closed his hand around it. Cabal reached into the bag with his right hand, ignoring the pain. When his hand closed around the butt of his Webley, the cool wood and metal seemed to ease the burning. He let the bag fall, lifting the gun and thumb, cocking its hammer at the same time. Jones had a knife, an ugly, large thing made of some crudely refined metal and placed in a lightly colored wooden handle. The expression of panicked hope in his face dissolved as he saw the gun. He whimpered, and Cabal shot him. The shot was placed to kill instantly, and it could hardly miss at that range. Jones was dead before he even started to fall. By the time his head cracked against the floor, Cabal was already preparing his departure. He gathered up the particular materials he had come to buy, wrapped them in a large square of butcher's paper, and packed them into his bag, placing the revolver upon the top of it in case it was needed in a hurry again. He strapped the bag shut and made as if to leave. Instead, he paused and looked back at Jones. Poor, paranoid, very dead Jones. At least, he assumed Jones was dead. He'd never heard of anybody surviving a Boxer 577 round delivered at close range to the interorbital space, but that wasn't to say he should take it as a given. He stood over Jones and looked at the damage. On examination, it appeared very much like one could take death by Boxer 577 round delivered at close range to the interorbital space as a given. Cabal sighed. He disliked killing, doubly so when it represented a nuisance to him, quite apart from the judicial ramifications. He was quite adept at running away from the police and bribing the few that lasted the course. The loss of Jones, however, made gathering the specialist materials Jones had been supplying quite difficult. Speaking of which, Cabal knelt and picked up the unwieldy knife Jones had made to attack him with. The blade was of some form of barely refined metal. Certainly not steel. Iron? He wondered. But why? It wouldn't hold an edge for long. It would rust easily, and it simply didn't make much sense for anybody to... Suddenly reaching a conclusion can bring a bolt of pleasure or a stab of dismay. This was definitely the latter. Cabal reached into his pocket and found the small piece of meteoric iron he kept with him and held it alongside the blade. While not the most thorough of metallurgical tests, there was still an undeniable similarity. With a sinking heart, Cabal looked at his right palm. There was his lifeline, just as it had always been there. Of course it was. Cabal stood, placed the metal in his pocket, put the knife into his bag to lie alongside his revolver, and left Jones's hat shop for the last time. He had killed once today in self-defense. He strongly suspected that he would kill again before the day was out, but this time it would be in revenge. As anticipated, the train trip passed without incident. Also, as anticipated, the walk home didn't. As he walked past a small hillock topped by an old elm, he suddenly found himself in shadow. He turned, expecting to find the black landau, the black horses, the black-clad coachman sitting and waiting. Thus, Cabal was not disappointed in most of his expectations. The coachman, however, was far more proactive than at their last meeting. As Cabal turned, the coachman grabbed his wrist, tore his Gladstone bag from his hand, and tossed it to the verge of the road as if it were dripping pus. Before Cabal could protest, the coachman had opened the landau's door, picked Cabal up by the scruff of his jacket, and thrown him in. The adjective unceremonious occurred to him as he landed face first on the carriage's floor. Disconcerting as his first entrance to the carriage had been, it seemed greatly preferable to the second. He heard the door slam shut. "Are you all right down there?" she asked. "Oh, good," he replied as he climbed into the seat facing her. "Insult to injury, wino, legerdemain this time. Run out of pixie dust or just couldn't be bothered? After all, you've won your little game, haven't you?" She looked at him, silent and serious, for several seconds. "Not a game, Mr. Cabal. No game at all." "No game," said Cabal in a low, dangerous voice. "No game? You have manipulated me right from the moment I first saw you. Induced me to draw false inferences. I should have thought something was wrong. The black landau, the black horses, the silent coachman, the widow's weeds. It was all so much more banal than I would have expected." "Then why did you believe?" Because supernatural entities insist on melodrama. I've met Satan. Did you know that? He is such a drama. What's the phrase? Queen? She seemed amused. Yes, just so. Brimstone, devils, fiery depths, cribbage. It's all so theatrical. He considered. Well, perhaps not the cribbage. I think that's more of a hobby. But the point is that when a mysterious funereal black carriage materializes out of thin air, abducts me, alters the passage of time, and its occupant lectures me on fate and life expectations, I apply Occam's razor and arrive at the obvious solution. Which was that you are death. I never said it, she said, serious again. You didn't. You just implied it with sledgehammer subtlety, and I accepted it based on the evidence. There was only one other alternative, and that I proved was not the case. At least, he took the piece of cold iron from his pocket and held it up. I thought I'd proved it. He watched her. She seemed calm, but her eyes never wavered from the small bit of metal. You are of the Fae, aren't you? I admit, you still have me at a loss to explain the lack of reaction. The metal should have burned you. You have a reputation for great deductive powers, Mr. Cabal. I shan't insult you by offering a solution. He hardly heard her. The threads were finally coming together. Unless, of course, you are not of pure blood. Your mortal heritage would prevent the worst physical effects. She nodded. Your reputation is well earned. I would thank you not to patronize me, Fräulein. I have killed on your behalf. I am not happy about it. Jones was a murderer and you were his employer, Cabal. You should be thankful that you were not sharing his fate. I should kill you. You should not. You would surely die in the attempt, especially without Jones's filthy knife. She saw Cabal's expression. Oh, with Jones dead, the defenses he'd placed upon his shop collapsed. It was searched as soon as you had skulked out of the door. Cabal began to protest that he did not skulk, but she talked over him. I would have been far more surprised if you had not taken the knife with you. Cabal weighed the piece of metal in his hand. It seemed altogether too feeble an ace to do him any good at this juncture. He slid it back into his pocket. This all seems very calculated. It has been planned for a long time. You should be flattered, Cabal. Both the Seelie and the Unseelie courts cooperated in this. It takes a great deal to make them sit down together. But you planned this for them. I have had dealings with the Fae before. They lack the detachment shown here. It would have all been hellhounds and ogres if left to them. The piece of theater with the lifeline. He paused to look at his palm. Very cunning. You made me aware of my own mortality and the mechanism to make me fear for it all at the same time. How did you prime Jones? His paranoia was quite evident. What did you use? A few anonymous letters? Some carefully ambiguous evidence that I was planning to betray him to the Fae? No wonder he was so fascinated about what comes after life. No wonder he startled so violently when I mentioned that once I had no soul. Proof positive to his terrified little mind that I am as you. I might have been able to calm him, except thanks to this verdampton line you placed on my palm, starting to disappear, I was convinced that I was going to die within seconds. Apparently at Jones's hand, and while we were both panicking, distracted from rational thought, we attacked each other. How could you be sure Jones would be dead at the end of it all, though? You had a gun. He had a knife. It was the probability. But if I'd not been able to reach my gun in time, he would have killed his only client. He would have had no reason to carry on harvesting us. Either way, we win. There were plenty who hoped that you would kill each other. And you? I can't help wondering why you have bothered to intercept me now the deed is done. The only conclusion I can reach is that you intend to kill me too. Perhaps crow a little of how clever you've been, but kill me nonetheless. I'm not the crowing type, she said, and Cabal was more sorry than he had been at any moment since entering the carriage that he did not have Jones's cold iron blade. Nor am I a killer. I researched you very carefully before arriving at this stratagem, Cabal. I have no need to kill you, or even the desire. My father was a poet. My mother, Lennon Sheed. A vampire, then. A muse. I understand the human soul, even one as ill-used, as lost and found as yours. That is why I am going to let you go. One day you may understand why. Deferred gratification, story of my life. He opened the door. She had promised him his life, but she was, after all, a woman in the Fae. The fact that she was half Fae didn't help her reliability. As he made to step down, he paused. A moment, he said over his shoulder. She raised an eyebrow. You say that you were half mortal, half Shay? I hope you don't intend your parting comment to be something spiteful about mongrels, Mr. Cabal. Not at all. It occurs to me, though, that even if cold iron does not burn you, its touch should have still been agonizing. Yet you did not flinch. And what does that tell you? He stepped down, closed the door, and doffed his hat. Auf Wiedersehen, Fräulein. Most respectfully, I hope and trust that we don't meet again. And yet you say Auf Wiedersehen. He ignored her evident amusement. May I know your name, just so I can add you to my lengthy list of people to avoid? Mais jeune, she replied, her humor undiminished. She pronounced it mais jeune. I have a title, too, but I'm not one to stand upon certainty. Slán up, Mr. Cabal. May we never meet again, for the best of reasons. She sat back and drew the coachman, acting on an unheard signal, drove on. Cabal watched the black coach travel down the dusty road until it was lost in a moment of heat haze. He was unsurprised when it failed to reappear. It took him almost 100 minutes to complete the walk home. He paused in his front garden and looked at the shrubs he knew sheltered small, villainous fairies. "Have you been talking to strange ladies?" he asked, neither expecting nor receiving an answer. He unlocked the door and went in. After a cool bath, he retired to the parlor with a simple supper of cold meat, bread, and a pot of tea. As he ate, he started to transfer notes from his daybook to the permanent record book, but gave up after a few minutes. His heart really was not in it. He sighed and went to the window to watch the shadows cast into the valley by the low sun. It had been, he concluded, a strange day, even by his standards. Finally, he walked to the shelves, took down a book he hadn't read in years. He settled himself back at the table, took a sip of tea, and started to read. To Sherlock Holmes, she is always the woman. And that is the death of me. I think we had some new people who came in who were very confused. Thank you for the compliments. I think someone complimented my reading voice. Thank you very much. A lot of people seem to enjoy it. I hope you're still here. If you are, great. If you're not, Revenge, Fae, Chaos, and I respect it. I knew you guys would really like that. As much as we talk about the Fae, I knew you would enjoy that one. But at one point, there's a callback to it in Fear Institute where he's reflecting on, the experience, and there's like this little cameo of like he would have been surprised if he had pulled a random card out of a tarot deck and it had been any card but death. It was a callback to that short story. You're actually really confused, but thank you for the compliment. If you want to know what this is about, this is a series called Johannes, Cabal the Necromancer. We read it every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Central. That was a short story that you just heard, but there is a 5-book series. We just finished the 3rd one, but all of the 3 books that I read on the channel from this series are on my YouTube. If you want to go to the YouTube link in my bio, you can find it. And if you like the story, you can join us next week. Or if you just want to fall asleep to my voice, a lot of people do that, I think. So whichever one you choose, there's loads of content for you to peruse if you want to know the story, or if you want to purchase it. It's by Jonathan Howard. Look up Johannes Cabal. It's a really good series. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. I don't know how I've managed to get a bunch of people to sit here and listen to me for 3 books now, but it's just that good. And we still have 2 short stories, guys, and 2 books. We have The Brothers Cabal, and we have The Fall of House Cabal, which are the 2 books remaining. And we have 2 short stories left, Ouroboros Ozo and The Long Spoon. So that'll be really fun. Next week, we'll start... do we want to knock out the rest of the short stories so we're prepped for the new characters? Or do we want to wait before the 5th book and do it like we've been doing? Everybody want to vote? Maybe has been convincing everyone that Jen is of the Fae for so long, and then I rip out a Fae-based short story. short stories next week? We can do that. I have a feeling you'll really like the remaining short stories. I have saved the best for last, you guys. I've saved the best for last, trust me. So, short stories. We got 3 votes for short stories and 4 votes for short stories. All right. Well, we seem to be of a unanimous agreement. Quite a bit to the point. 5 votes for short stories. Awesome. All right. I think we're 6 for shorts, 7 for shorts. That is majority vote for short stories. So we will knock those 2 out next time. I feel like you'll really like The Long Spoon, especially. That one's probably the longest short story and one of my favorites. Ouroboros Ozo is also my other favorite short story. If you thought the Ereshkigal working was kind of funny, wait till we get into Long Spoon. And Ouroboros Ozo is very introspective, and I actually have content planned around that, actually. So that'll be really fun to do, so you all can get context for sort of what is coming here. So, real fun. Can't wait for it, you guys. I'm so glad you guys are liking it. Seriously, as much as I thank you all for being here and thank you all for being a part of it, and making a whole book club has been kind of awesome, and I never once thought this would happen. So it's still really cool that you guys show up all the time and listen to me read, and that you all like the book and the content. It's been kind of amazing, and if anybody would have told me a year ago that this is where I'd be at, I'd be like, seems sus. Yeah, we've read 3 books on TikTok. How many lines I have? Oh, on my palm? I have a lifeline. I've checked. You want me to take a picture of my palm and put it in the redacted? Whoever's good at reading palms, go to town. Do palm readings in VC. Yes. Yeah, read my palm. I don't care. Let's see what you got. If there's any, if you want to read my palm, send me messages, DM me. I'll send you a picture of my palm, as clear a picture as I can get, and I'll send it to you, and you can tell me when I die. So, if anybody wants to dissect my palm for the betterment of society, or just the betterment of me, that's totally fine. Totally chill with it, and DM me so I can give you a picture. Do you want to see that now? See what? My palm? I'll send you a DM with my palm. Charging $5 per palm. I'm not gonna charge anybody money to see my palm, but yeah. Oh, I could really sick. Supposedly, are you reading your own palm? Does that make you buy? Can you read your own palm? You can, right? I feel like that's allowed. We're looking at everyone's in redacted right now. Is that what we're doing? Are we going to... Sorry, Twitter. Oh my god. Go away, Twitter. We don't need you right now, Twitter. Okay. Oh, thank you. I appreciate the compliment. So we're doing a whole palm reading thing in redacted. Alright. I also got to put my Discord link back up. So I'm going to do that when we get out of here. I don't think because Pridefall is over, I think. I haven't gotten any more messages, supposedly, that Pridefall is still happening. So I think I can put my Discord back up and we're all fine from being harassed in our little community of book club people. Book club cosplay nerds. You were using a palm reading thingy. Okay. Like app. There's probably an app for that. Yeah, hopefully Pridefall is like over with. So I'm gonna put my Discord link back up. If you want to join a book club, there's a Discord. I'll put the link back on my link tree. And so some of the new people can join if they want to. I think there's only new 2 people who are interested in coming back for book club. So we will post that back up. There are several apps for that. There's an app for everything now. So like, there's an app where you can feed and grow a pet Cthulhu, like a Tamagotchi. There's an app for reading your palm. What? How do you find that out? All right, I'll take your word for it that you've died twice in a past life. This will be really intriguing. This is going to be a fun... There's an app that's like a Tamagotchi Cthulhu. I'll look it up. I know there's like a Tamagotchi Cthulhu. You can like make him destroy cities and it makes him happy. And like, I'll see if I can get, because I know my, like an acquaintance of mine that I used to work with, it was like an old coworker, had sent me something on it, so I have to find it and send you the info so you could get a pet Tamagotchi Cthulhu if you want one. AO3 unfortunately won't get one. Wait, what? What's going on? AO3 what? Oh, AO3 won't get an app. I'm pretty sure there's an AO3 reader app, but there's not like a something to like publish or something. Like not all functions are available, but there's like an AO3 like reader app. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it seemed like there would be a lot of and it would be really hard to get to like mainline an app because it's all like crowdsourced, right? Same dark mode. Dark mode on everything. Everything should have a dark mode. If you don't have a dark mode, what are you doing? Everything on my phone is set to dark mode. You were there when they put it together. Oh, the app, the AO3 reader app. Is that what you're talking about? Dark mode is light. Facts. Oh, you can't use dark mode. Oh, rip. Oh. Just like there are people with sensitivity to light, there's people sensitive to dark, so I get that. It takes both kinds. Oh, you know the oh, that's nuts. See, I don't know anybody, so that's wild to me. Yeah, my Discord's gray. I think I didn't know if there was even a dark mode, because it doesn't feel like it needs one unless I inadvertently turned it on and forgot I turned it on, and that's why my Discord is gray. You were there when the ancient AO3 magic was written. That's kind of crazy, actually. I don't know anybody, so the fact that you know any people is awesome. Yeah, okay, I thought so. I thought the redacted is normally gray. Gray is dark mode. Okay. Seems legit. Everything on my phone is just automatically dark mode, I think. That would freak me out, actually. I think I'm so used to dark mode now that anything that I download that isn't dark mode, I'm like, whoa, what is this? I deleted, I used to have a Facebook, but I deleted it like a long time ago. And the only time I use it is to look at these crochet hooks that this TikToker that I follow has on there, because I want to know when her shop opens, and she updates everything on the Facebook page and not always on her TikTok first, and she sells out in like 5 minutes of everything. And her crochet hooks are awesome, and I want one so badly. And so I have to go on the Facebook page to make sure I don't miss it next time, right? And every single time I get on the Facebook, it's like blinding white, and I'm like, what happened here? My Facebook never looked like this, and I realized I just had it on dark mode the entire time when I did have one. But when I got rid of it, like, it now automatically just tries to put me in like this really white Facebook box. I'm like, I hate Facebook. I hate you. I was going to say, I've tried looking for dark mode for TikTok, and I don't have one. But mostly, it doesn't matter as much, because I don't spend a whole lot of time on my notifications menu, I will say, because it's so white. So if I miss a notification from you, you know why. It's because I don't spend a lot of time there. It freaks me out. I'm normally watching cat videos. Huh. I don't know, I kind of like the gray. It does enough for me. As long as it's not blindingly white, I'm okay with it. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be dark, like just completely black or anything. But I would prefer it if it's not white. It's just too bright. Does not care about my blue light filters. That tracks. That tracks. All the cats all the time. You know, I'll be watching all the cat videos. And now, I have to go back. Okay, I'll tell you when I get off here. One, I'm going to go put the Discord link back. Since I'm pretty sure Pridefall is over. I haven't heard anything about it this week. No one's DM'd me. No one's messaged me and been like, Pridefall. So, I'm assuming it's over. I'm going to put my info back up. And then I'm going to download this live so I can post it on the YouTube. And then I'm going to catch up on all the cat videos. And then I'm going to hop in VC, and we're going to get down with some sweet, sweet bonus content of reading everybody's palm. And make sure you get your eulogy on there. We're going to vote on the best eulogy. No, I'm joking. We don't have to do that. But I do want to read your eulogies. So if you've written a eulogy or in the process of writing a eulogy, I'm still very much interested. I love eulogies. And then we can hop in VC and read Pickman's model. And read everyone's palm. Yeah. Dolphin Teal is the muted version. No. I will admit, Jin's icon is the brightest icon in there. That's alright. You take your time. I'm going for quality over quantity. Or speed. Quality over speed. Take as much time as you need. Am interested though. Will do. I'll at you. If you don't wake up, I'm not adding you multiple times and being a whole crazy person like some people I know. And no. You can send those anywhere. You can DM me on Discord and send it there. You can send it to me on Instagram. You can fucking film yourself reading it and add me on TikTok. Don't care. Anywhere you can, really. I'll read it. I need to catch up on my Instagram messages. Maybe sent me one forever ago that I still haven't responded to, and I know it's in my alert box, but I just checked my inbox the other day because I got a notification that someone had messaged me, and it was Jen, and then I had a bunch of unread messages, and I was like, why does Instagram not notify me? So now that I know they're there, I gotta go back and read all my Instagram notes. So because I checked a while ago, I actually took Instagram photos today, you guys. I took straight up photos. Like, I never update my Instagram. It's the last thing I do. But if you want to DM me on Discord, that's fine. It should allow you to send messages to me. It allows me to send messages to everybody, but I don't know. Maybe that's because I have privileges. I'm pretty sure I'll accept your friend request on Discord if you have to. I don't care. I don't know. I feel a lot better today than I did yesterday, like a week ago. And I think partially is because I'm over caffeinated. No, there's not technically, there's no age require. There's nothing bad in there. So there's not like so no, you can join it. I'll have to put the link back in there though. Because I took it down for Pridefall because a bunch of people were coming after LGBTQ content creators and doing some not great stuff. So I took the Discord link down for the first half of the month because people were DMing me and there were conflicting dates about when it was happening. And I didn't want to take risks with anybody's data in Discord. We have a lot of LGBTQI people in there. And I am also considered part of the community by some people. And so I took my Discord down. I'm not super public about that, but I took it down just in case. Yeah, there were a lot of people who apparently don't take kindly to us folks, and we're harassing some people and being really mean. So I didn't want my Discord link to get out and then a bunch of people to have problems. So yeah, the only friend requests I've received were received by people I knew that were already in the Discord. So I've accepted no other ones. So I'm going to post the Discord link back up. So some of the new people that seemed interested in the books can join if you want to do that. Mostly it's just us posting pictures of Walmart fails and cute cats and talking about nonsense like 80% of the time. But it's a nice little community. So if you want to join, you can. We can hold a few more. I think we're gonna cap out soon, though. I'm gonna remove that Discord. I don't know if you have to. I think you can just DM people. If you don't have to write me a eulogy. I'm just saying. Would I enjoy it? Yes. Will I read it? Absolutely. Can we all vote on them? No. I vote on the best one. I just get back to you if you won. Like a sweepstakes. I don't know what you win yet, but we'll figure it out. Yeah, that's what I meant by talking about nonsense. That's what VC is. That's what all VC is. And sometimes I read a story. Yeah, that's majority like how I'm like. I'm like, we have a server. We have a whole thing. I don't need to friend people. We win pond. Yeah, I check it every morning just to see like what nonsense has been said. And most of the time it's pictures I have no context for, so it's like a random Minecraft photo. A picture of whatever Ray has put in there about Walmart failing, like, and then some nonsense memes, and I'm like, I don't know what they were talking about. I can't even guess. I don't want context. A lot of the time, I'm just looking at stuff, and I'm like, yeah, I don't need to know that. This is none of my business. I'm not involved. I do not claim this. I have never met any of you freaks a day in my life. No. It is largely no man's land in there every morning. I'll post the link after this. Context chaos. That is all I need to know. I'm like, that's it. That's all I need to know. Whatever happened, it was chaotic and they were ruling it. I don't always want to know. I'll say sometimes the better off I am not knowing, because then I have plausible deniability for whatever you've done. There were. And I was like, why are there a bunch of squishmallows in here? That's fine. That's wholesome. All right. And then there were a bunch of links to stuff, and just reading the descriptions, I was like, what is going on in there right now? So I gotta update some stuff, update some content. I got a new mic cover rig, sort of. I made it. I made it out of stuff. So I am going to test that out later this week. I'm redoing Johannes's wig, so I'm going to, and I was just editing some other Johannes content that I've been literally sitting on for a few months for reasons. But we got a lot of exciting stuff coming up. I'm excited. We get short stories next week, same time, same place, this couch, Tuesday, 8 p.m. Central. Get your cats, get your smoothie, get your stuffed animal, get a blanket. It's going to be a fun time. Anyway, but I will see you all next week. Or if you're going to the Redacted, I will see you in there in a few minutes. But yeah, thanks for coming. Thanks for supporting me. Thanks for keeping me caffeinated. Everybody that sends coffee to my P.O. box, always appreciated. Today's coffee is sponsored by Lady Eva and Swiftblood. So thank you all. Thank you to all the cat videos as donations I get. I really appreciate you. I hope you all know that. Sorry, I'm still reading comments. Toshi, some new cat videos. Thank you. I'll see you in a minute, you guys. Aw, thank you. We're actually closing up shop, but I'm so glad you showed last minute dip in there just to make sure I'm alive. I appreciate it. I'll see you guys in the VC. Bye, guys.